Chapter 129. When Su Chui returned to the Desa town, she immediately ordered the Su family to find the whereabouts of the witch. But the news surprised Ma'am. What? The witch is dead. Li Yin stood in front of Ma'am. Su Chui bowed and nodded slowly. Yes. It is said that she died suddenly. Many people said that the witch said something she shouldn't say and was punished by the gods. Punished by the gods. Su Chui murmured, and then she looked crazy. It's good to be punished by the gods. My Su family's fine grandson is gone because of her words. My poor fifth grandson, boo. Ma'am. Su Chui covered her face and cried bitterly. Li Yin didn't know what to do, but he also understood that the third child of the first madam was not so good. Mammy Li, who got the news from the midwife, was the last one to know the result. When she heard that the fifth child of the Su family was a daughter, she couldn't help but feel happy. She thought that the first madam deserved it. Then she told the news to Su Li, who just returned to the courtyard. Fifth sister, I know. Wet nurse, quickly go and cook. I've been busy the whole day and I'm about to die, Su Li responded calmly. Mammy Li sighed that the miss had a higher realm. Then she went back to the kitchen. Su Li took a bath and changed clothes as usual. She washed away the smell of smoke in the byway building. Then she sat quietly to adjust her breath and consolidate her cultivation. She was not surprised that Zhu Yan gave birth to a daughter again. In the previous life, Zhu Yan also gave birth to the fourth and fifth children. They were all daughters. Every time when the news of Zhu Yan's pregnancy came out, Ma'am. Su Chui would go down the mountain from the temple and accompany Zhu Yan for a year. Then she returned disappointed. When Zhu Yan gave birth to the sixth child, Ma'am. Su Chui didn't bother to go down the mountain. She had seen that Zhu Yan didn't have a son at all. However, Zhu Yan's sixth child was indeed a son. Unfortunately, he was poisoned by Li Yuelyan, who was eager to avenge Su Qinghao. He didn't even have the chance to open his eyes and see the world. He was reincarnated to meet the king of hell. At that time, Su Chui was around. Li Yuelyan would not have succeeded easily. After Ma'am. Su Chui got the news, she was so angry that she vomited blood and died directly. Su Li remembered all kinds of memories of the previous life very clearly. She knew that Ma'am. Su Chui actually didn't like Zhu Yan. Li Yuelyan was Li Yuelyan's second wife. What she wanted was that Zhu Yan could give birth to a legitimate first grandchild. But it was ridiculous that Ma'am. Su Chui didn't like Zhu Yan until she died. The next morning, Su Li came to the byway building. Su Zipei, who had lost a lot of weight, suddenly came to her with an infant in her arms. Third sister, what are you doing? Su Li looked confused, but she had a guess in her heart. Su Zipei snorted and impatiently put the swaddle into Su Li's hands. This is fifth sister. You take care of her. Su Li said in surprise, shouldn't I take care of you? How can I take care of them? What else? You are so annoying. This is mother's order. You don't have to come here in the future. They don't make precious beggars chicken here. I can handle it. Su Zipei put her hands on her hips and snorted. Mother said, if there is no milk, look for a wet nurse or rice soup. You're also like this. I am tired now, and I have no time to feed this useless thing. Su Li looked down at the infant in the swaddle who was just born a few days ago and full of curiosity about the world. There was a trace of undetectable tenderness in her eyes. In the previous life, although fifth sister was not favored by her family, she was Zhu Yan's biological daughter. She lived a comfortable life and often stole food from the kitchen for Su Li to eat. I see. Su Li nodded. At this time, Su Huanli saw the two sisters and the infant in Su Li's arms. A trace of impatience flashed in his eyes and he scolded, Why are you standing here? Isn't the restaurant busy enough? Go out and help. Su Zipei shrank her neck and heard a cry. It turned out that fifth sister was scared by Su Huanli and began to cry. Again. Crying all day long. So annoying. In the past 2 days, she took care of her mother and fifth sister. Her mother was easy to deal with, but fifth sister often cried. It was useless to persuade her. If she was not afraid of going to jail, she would strangle fifth sister directly. Su Huanli was also upset for a while. He quickly waved his hand to Su Li. You go back first today and let the mammy take care of the baby. The business of the restaurant will be bad if she is kept here. Su Li pursed her lips and said, Father, you haven't named fifth sister yet. Huh? Su Huanli seemed to have just got up, and then he waved his hand and impatiently dismissed, Li, you name her. I don't have the time. Then the infant in the swaddle cried louder. Su Huanli immediately pushed Su Li out of the back door and said, Get out of here. Annoying. Su Li's eyes were cold. Her eyes were like a blade cutting through the air. Su Huanli instantly felt cold all over his body, as if he was stared at by a prehistoric beast. But this feeling only lasted for a moment and disappeared. Seeing Su Li go away with the baby, Su Huanli touched his head and said to himself, I'm too tired these days. It seems that I have to have a good rest. In the courtyard of the school, Mammy Li was shocked when she saw Su Li came back in the daytime with a baby in her arms. It's fifth sister. Su Li carefully placed the baby on the bed and then whispered, Mammy, find a wet nurse for fifth sister. This little guy has been drinking rice soup all the time. I'm afraid that he is hungry. I'm going now. Mammy Li felt sad. Miss was in the same situation in those days. If she didn't have a baby who died early, Su Li would have been drinking rice soup all the time. Su Li leaned over the bed and looked at the quiet sleeping face of the little girl on the bed. No one knew what she dreamed of, but she smiled innocently. In the previous life, your name was Su Linan. In this life, you don't need to choose such a meaningless name. You should have your free life. You are Su Yuxing. Su Li chuckled and scratched Su Yosheng's smooth face. Although the fifth sister was born by Zhu Yan and was the flesh and blood of the Su family, Su Li didn't hate it. Instead, she felt that it was a chance for her to make up for her regret. In the previous life, she watched the fifth sister fall into the abyss of endless desire under the indoctrination of Zhu Yan and Su Zipei. In this life, she could at least change this and make the fifth sister's childhood more bright. There were few things that couldn't be bought with money in the Qinghe town. Soon Mammy Li came back with a wet nurse. When the wet nurse saw Su Li, she was shocked at first. Later, she knew that the baby was Su Li's younger sister, not an illegitimate daughter. Then she also saw that Su Li was still a virgin. She was relieved immediately. She was the first talented girl in the Qinghe town. It was a big scandal that she secretly gave birth in the school. After arranging the affairs of the fifth sister, it was dark. Su Li went upstairs after dinner. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed by the window. There was one more person in the room. It was Fang Yuan. Su Li frowned and said, It's just after 5 o'clock now. You came 3 hours earlier. What happened? Fang Yuan looked dignified and said quickly, Just now, a group of men in black attacked the satrap's mansion. Most of the official silver was stolen. A large number of embroidery materials that were supposed to be handed over to the imperial court were also burned. The Yen mansion is in a mess. Su Li's pupils contracted violently and she said, Finally, you can't help it? No, it's not Wu Yun. Fang Yuan looked more serious and said, Wu Yun didn't move at all, so we didn't notice it. We couldn't help satrap Yen. Su Li took a deep breath and sat down. She said slowly, Yen Shishuan's cultivation is at the peak of the acquired realm. If he tried his best to stop them, he could kill 1 or 2 of them. How could he let them succeed? I don't know. Satrap Yen is also anxious. Now he is thoroughly investigating the Qinghe town. The official silver can't be transported out of the town quietly. We also suspect that the thieves have a foothold in the town. While talking, Su Li had changed into the Mr. Li costume that she hadn't used for a long time. She said, It's urgent. I will go with you. If the Yen family is defeated, the Lin Li building will be in trouble. She bet on the Yen family. If the Yen family was blamed by the imperial court for incompetence, it was very likely to lose its position. At that time, no matter which family of the Jin family or the Lin family became the satrap, they would have a way to deal with the Lin Li building. The inborn senior was powerful, but in front of the giant Dahan country, it was too small. Speaking of it, it's because Yen Shishuan is too weak. While running, Su Li's eyes flashed. It could be said that the Qinghe province was the weakest among the 20 provinces of the Dahan country. In the other 19 provinces, the satrap himself had the inborn cultivation. One of them dominated the main city, and others didn't dare to act rashly. Or, there was a senior of the inborn realm in the family. Even if the family couldn't dominate, it could suppress other families. No one was like Yen Shishuan. He didn't reach the inborn realm, and there were few people in the mansion. There was not even a person in the acquired 9th hurdle. Yen Shishuan only had the military power in his hand. But he couldn't use the military to deal with the Jin family, who also had an official position. Otherwise, Jin Zhentian would immediately charge him with the crime of using the military power without authorization, which was a serious crime of the imperial court. When Su Li came to the satrap's mansion, she saw Yen Shishuan was angry. Search. Search with all your strength. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, you must find those thieves. Except for the necessary personnel to look after the rest of the official silver, all the people in the satrap's mansion were sent by Yen Shishuan to search for the whereabouts of the thieves, including Yen Hongxiu and Yen Zai. Yen Zai was about to go out with a group of people, but he ran into Su Li. He immediately said happily, "Father, Mr. Li is here. Mr. Li, I haven't seen you for a long time. How are you recently?" Of course, the Linli building is good, but there seems to be some trouble in your mansion. Su Li smiled and her words were quite meaningful. Yen Shishuan braced himself to come over and sighed, "Mr. Li, I'm afraid that you will be disappointed this time." "Alas, satrap, you don't need to say more. The Linli building is here to help. If you need any help, please let me know." Yen Shishuan shook his head helplessly and said, "Thank you very much, Mr. Li. But I still don't understand how the thieves sneak into the mansion. Even I didn't notice it. Now it's just a blind cat catching a mouse. It's purely luck." Yen Zai listened to the conversation between the two and was full of doubts. It was obvious that they owed money to Mr. Li. Was there a secret relationship between his father and Mr. Li? Yen Zai suddenly remembered that half a month ago, the family suddenly cheered up the financial situation. He was shocked and looked at Su Li from the original reverence to a layer of gratitude. "Report." Suddenly, a soldier panted forward and said loudly, "Lord, we have found the whereabouts of the official silver. We found 50,000 taels of official silver in the Baiwei building on the Dong'er Street. The official seal is clear. It is the lost thing in the treasury. The Baiwei building." Yen Shishuan's face changed dramatically and he couldn't help being shocked. Then he said sternly, "Block the Baiwei building immediately. Don't let anyone escape. Arrest the people of the Baiwei building." Yen Shishuan paused and then said in a low voice, "Arrest them all. Leave no one alive." Fang Yuan stood behind Su Li. He obviously heard that Su Li's breath was slightly stagnant and then returned to normal. "Mr. Li, the official silver has been settled. Sorry, I can't stay here." "Excuse me." Su Li's face was covered with a veil, so people couldn't see the change of her expression. Her tone was still as usual. "It should be so. Since there is a result, the Linli building will not intervene. I'm leaving. Thank you for the help of the Linli building. I'm very grateful." After some polite greetings, Yen Shishuan immediately left with his people. Su Li and Fang Yuan returned to the Linli building. Standing in front of the window on the top floor, they clearly saw that the Baiwei building was crowded with soldiers. People were dragged away one after another. "Su Li, if you want to retaliate against the Su family, you don't have to do this." Fang Yuan organized his words and didn't know how to continue. Chapter 130. "It's not you?" Fang Yuan slightly opened his thin lips and was surprised. It was not that he was inconsiderate, but that Su Li's reaction was too indifferent when she heard the news. She was so indifferent that he suspected that the initiator was Su Li herself. "It's better to think about how to save the situation than to doubt me." Su Li looked at Su Huanli struggling to be dragged away by the officers and soldiers. She said coldly, "I don't have time to rebuild the Linli building in other counties." Fang Yuan watched Su Li leave. He frowned for a moment and then relaxed. Thinking about it carefully, Su Li couldn't be the murderer who stole the official silver. Otherwise, the good situation that the Linli building painstakingly created would be destroyed. He only saw the hatred between Su Li and the Su family, but ignored Su Li's code of conduct. Whether it was the agreement with the brother and sister of the Yen family or the 1,000,000 taels of silver lent to Yen Shixuan, it was enough to prove that Su Li favored and supported the Yen family. How could she destroy the chessboard and put the Yen family in danger? I was impulsive. Thinking of this, Feng Yuan was annoyed. He not only thought in the wrong direction, but also blamed Su Li impulsively. Now he felt that he was extremely stupid and didn't know what Su Li would think of him. Feng Yuan, why are you still here? The men in black have made new moves. Su Li has gone to the school. Chu Qingning came in and shouted hurriedly. Feng Yuan was like waking up from a dream. He immediately returned to normal and left with Chu Qingning in a hurry. When Su Li rushed back to the school, it was dawn. Soon she received a message from Wen Ruomin. Wen Ruomin asked her to go to discuss something important. When Su Li went there, she found that Yen Shixuan was also there. Seeing that Su Li came over with a confused face, Wen Ruomin felt distressed. She didn't know what happened last night. Dean, why do you call me here so early? Su Li said with confusion. Then she turned around and seemed to see Yen Shixuan. She quickly saluted and said, I'm Su Li, Satrap Yen. Yen Shixuan nodded slightly and looked solemn. There was a trace of apology in his eyes. Su Li, you come at the right time. I have something to tell you. Wen Ruomin's expression was complicated. She held Su Li's hand and hesitated for a long time before telling her what happened last night. Satrap Yen knew that it wasn't your father who did it, but the Jin and Lin families were keeping a close eye on it. He had no choice but to bring your father back to prevent them from having any evidence against him. It could be considered as a covert protection for your father. Su Li's eyes were red. She bit her lips and nodded. Wen Ruomin was both gratified and distressed. Su Li was very sensible. But it was too cruel for her to be involved in the intrigues between adults at the age of 16. Look at this. This was delivered to the academy by the beggar today. I've already sent someone to investigate the origins of this note, but there's probably no result. When Ruomin picked up the note on the table and handed it to Su Li stared at it and a vague light flashed in her eyes. What was written on the note wasn't evil, if one looked at the surface. This was clearly a secret letter to be given to Su Li alone. It stated the time and place for Su Li to meet, how to distribute the official silver profits, and the prospects for a better future. If Su Li didn't stand here, she almost believed that she was with the thieves who stole the official silver. Wen Ruomin and Yen Shixuan were not fools. They figured out the contradiction quickly. If it was really a secret letter, how could it be delivered to the academy by a beggar? After discussing for a moment, they quickly came to a conclusion. The message on the note seemed to be written to Su Li, but it was actually written to them. It was a threatening letter to ask them to hand over Su Li. Dean, I have nothing to do with the people in the letter. Su Li breathed quickly and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. It seemed that she was afraid that Yen Shixuan and Wen Ruomin didn't believe her. Wen Ruomin sighed and touched Su Li's soft hair. She said with a smile, Silly girl, of course, we know that you have nothing to do with them. This letter actually asks us to hand you over. What? Su Li slightly opened her eyes as if she didn't understand. Yen Shixuan frowned and stared at the crumpled note in Su Li's hand. Su Li came from the Desa town. She had a gentle and quiet temperament. Her personal social circle was also very narrow. It was impossible for her to become enemies with these thieves. The only possibility was that she was implicated by them. Lord Yen, I probably already know who is playing tricks behind the scenes. The light of wisdom flashed in Wen Ruomin's eyes. She said, Su Li, do you remember who you offended when you visited Dean Gong? Dean Gong? Su Li pretended to think and then suddenly understood. She blurted out, Is it Madame Gong? But I just contradicted her a little. Does she have to do this? Madame Gong. Yen Shixuan's expression changed. Finally, he was completely gloomy. If Wu Yun did have the means and ability to set up such a trap, it was hateful. Why didn't he think that she was behind the scenes? Wen Ruomin couldn't help but smile bitterly when she heard Su Li's naive words. She said, Su Li, some people are narrow-minded, which can't be measured by ordinary people. Wu Yun is narrow-minded and will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Her plan was ruined by a senior. It is inevitable that she will vent her anger on others. Everyone likes to bully the weak. Among her enemies in the Qinghe town, you are the easiest one to bully. I see. Su Li seemed to be suddenly enlightened, and then fell into deeper anxiety. She hurriedly said, "What should we do?" Workshop owner Su. Yen Shishun, who had been silent beside her, finally said, "For now, we can only ask you to go to this place to test it. I will send someone to follow and protect you in secret. If we see the note and don't respond, it is hard to guarantee that the other party will run away with the official silver. If I lose, I will take my wife and children back to my hometown. But the head of the Su family will be in danger. Under the pressure of the Jin family, I am afraid that I can only hand him over to the imperial court for punishment." Workshop owner Su, what do you think? Su Li seemed to be struggling, and then she gritted her teeth and said, "I am willing to go. I believe that everything in the world has its own public opinion. I, Su Li, will take responsibility for what I have done. Madam Gong, just come to me. There is no need to embarrass my father." Yen Shishun felt ashamed when he heard this. He had underestimated this young owner's courage. Although she was very afraid, she stood up without hesitation for a father who did not treat her as a human, and more importantly for the Yen family. She was young, but she could see everything clearly. Alas, girl, when Rumin seemed to think of something in the past, and sadness flashed in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and said in a deep voice, "Girl, don't worry. Even if I lose my face, I will ask a senior to protect you in secret. You will definitely be safe." After the three people discussed the time and details, Yen Shishun arranged soldiers to escort Su Li back to the courtyard, and then sent seriously ill people to protect her. After Su Li and Yen Shishun left, when Ruomin sat for a moment, and then her turbid eyes became clearer. She took out another note from under the table. This note was found at her bedside in the morning, and she did not show it to anyone except herself. If Su Li does not come, the Yen family and the Qinghe girls' school will have a hard time. When Rumin, you are still the same as 16 years ago. You can't protect her at all. Ter. When Ruomin tore the note into pieces with a sullen face. Then she glanced at the direction of Su Li's courtyard and said softly, "Guards, I want to go to the Linli building." The courtyard of the school was heavily protected by soldiers, so it naturally could not stop Su Li. It did not take Su Li much time to return to the Linli building. Wu Yun has a helper, and his means are good. Su Li put the note on the table calmly and said, "He can steal a large amount of official silver from the government office and burn the embroidery without being noticed. The first possibility is that this person's lightness skill is so high that he can ignore the protection of the warehouse of the government office and enter it. The second possibility is that the person is like you, Su Li, and he has mastered an extremely brilliant poison skill. The elite soldiers of the government office will be in a trance and be ignorant." Chu Qingning shook his head and said, but Feng Yuan retorted, "It is unlikely. With Yen Shishun's sense of smell, he should be aware of the existence of the smoke. Of course, if it is the kind of black smoke refined by Su Li, it is another matter. Is there a third possibility?" Feng Mu obediently sat at the table and looked at the crowd. He raised his hand and said, "A mole? No way." Yin Xuetong showed doubt and said, "That is an important place of the government office. The warehouse is guarded by the elite soldiers of the government office. They pledge their loyalty to the satrap's mansion. If there is a mole in this group of people, will there be any secrets in the satrap's mansion?" Looking at the heated discussion, Su Li smiled slightly and said, "Of course there is a mole. But it is not in the government office, but in the Baiwei building." Speaking of the Baiwei building, everyone's look changed. Feng Yuan reacted first and said in a cold tone, "You mean?" Su Li kept smiling and said slowly, "Only Su Huanli was arrested. Even my dear third sister happened to go back to the inn to take care of my mother. It is really a coincidence." Zhu Yen and Su Zipei? Chu Qingning was speechless and looked strange. But why did they do that? Didn't the first madam just give birth? What is the benefit for her to put Su Huanli in prison? Su Li didn't answer, but Yin Xuetong showed a thoughtful expression. It seemed that it was not very strange for Zhu Yan to do such a thing. But at this time, Haydn said outside the door, "Bosses, Dean Wen of the Qinghe Girls' School suddenly came to visit." "Wen Ruomin?" Su Li raised her eyebrows. "She just came back from the school." Could it be? After a while, in the reception hall of the back hall of the Lin Li building, Su Li dressed as Mr. Li and Wen Ruomin sat opposite each other. Yin Xuetong poured a cup of tea for Wen Ruomin respectfully and left with a smile. Wen Ruomin was quite flattered. In terms of status, the shopkeeper of the Lin Li building was almost the same as her, the dean. Yin Xuetong's service was too friendly. She felt strange, but Su Li's voice pulled her back from thinking to reality. "I haven't seen you for a long time. Dean Wen, you are still elegant. But why do you suddenly visit me?" Wen Ruomin looked ashamed. She stood up and bowed slightly. "I heard that Mr. Li has been practicing in silence. I shouldn't disturb you rashly." "Mr. Li, can you let me tell you a story and then listen to my request?" "Speaking of this, it is actually related to the little lecturer Su Li in my school." Su Li's eyes flashed, but she said with a smile, "In this case, Dean Wen, please tell me. I am all ears." Chapter 131. 18 years ago, a talented girl from a poor family was born in the Qinghe town. Her name was Su Yun. Su Yun's family had been poor farmers for 3 generations, but Su Yun's parents sold everything they had just to let her go to school. They thought that it would be the best result if she could only read a few words and marry a good family. Unexpectedly, Su Yun showed an extraordinary talent in literature. Soon, Wen Ruomin, who had just taken over as the dean of the girls' school, took a fancy to her and accepted her as a student. This kind of student relationship was not the general teacher-student relationship in the school. It was more like the close relationship between master and apprentice in the martial arts circle. Wen Ruomin treated Su Yun as her own daughter and taught her carefully. Su Yun didn't let Wen Ruomin down. At the age of 16, she successfully passed the preliminary examination and entered the Yunjing National College. 1 year later, she almost became a female official of the Dahan country. Su Yun's parents and Wen Ruomin were very happy. 1 year later, Su Yun's reputation as a talented woman spread all over Yunjing. Many young talents in Yunjing chased after her like crazy bees and butterflies. They all wanted to marry Su Yun. Although Wen Ruomin was worried that Su Yun didn't know people well, she believed that Su Yun could choose a good family to marry because of her intelligence. From then on, Su Yun became the madam of a rich and powerful family in Yunjing and one of the few female officials in the imperial court. But 2 years later, when she saw Su Yun escape back to the Qinghe town with blood all over her body and finally die in her arms, she was totally stunned. I don't know what she experienced in Yunjing in those 2 years and why she was chased. But when I remembered that I encouraged her to enter the official career and become a female official, I regretted it. Sometimes I think that if I didn't let her go to Yunjing that year, maybe she wouldn't die at the age of 18. And I didn't even know who her enemy was. Seeing Wen Ruomin burst into tears in front of her, Su Li's face under the veil didn't change at all. Only a flash of light flashed in her eyes from time to time. Su Yun also had the surname Su. It was fate. There were too many people with the surname Su in the world. Besides, the Qinghe province was a big province with the surname Su. 3 out of 10 people had the surname Su. It seemed that Su Yun had a tragic life. But Su Li had experienced so many tragedies in her previous life. Wen Ruomin's words couldn't arouse any emotion in her heart. However, Su Li comforted him on the surface. "This is fate. I think Miss Su Yun won't blame you in heaven. It's been so many years, so I'm sorry for your loss." Wen Ruomin wiped her tears and said embarrassedly, "Mr. Li, I'm sorry. This old lady has said so much, but actually, I want to say..." The next words seemed to be a little difficult to say. Wen Ruomin hesitated for a while and finally said, "Su Li also encountered great danger. Satrap Yen said that Mr. Li's cultivation was profound. Even Satrap Yen felt inferior. Could you ask Mr. Li to protect the girls secretly?" Wen Ruomin begged and made a fist and palm salute. She said, I think that Mr. Lee doesn't like my family and background. If Mr. Lee agrees to help me, I will be duty-bound to help you if you need any help in the future. A strange feeling rose in Su Lee's heart. She couldn't figure out why when Ruomin begged so much for her. Even if it was to make up for the regret in her heart many years ago, she couldn't understand it. Because she would never have the emotion to make up for her regret in this lifetime. If she had a grudge, she would take revenge on the spot. Dinwen, although I'm very moved by your words. Su Lee said with regret, but something went wrong in my practice method recently. It's not suitable for me to help you. Otherwise, I will definitely help you in person. Really? When Ruomin looked disappointed. Su Lee's tone was sincere, so she didn't doubt the truth. Otherwise, Mr. Lee could refuse directly based on his superior identity. Why did he make up an inauspicious excuse? However, I can send someone to protect Miss Su Lee secretly. Although his cultivation is not as good as mine, he is also a good fighter. Even Satrap Yen can't fight with him for more than 10 moves. What do you think? Su Lee said again. When Ruomin's disappointment immediately turned into surprise. She said hurriedly, "That's really great. Mr. Lee, you scared me to death when you didn't finish your words. I believe that Mr. Lee won't beat around the bush because of your character. The thief and I will meet at the broken temple in the mountain outside the city at midnight tomorrow. I will go back and wait for the good news. Dinwen, please." After seeing Wen Ruomin off, Su Lee returned to the underground addendum. Fang Yuan and others immediately surrounded her. "You want us to protect you?" Chu Qingning felt strange. Was there a more strange request than this in the world? There must be a lot of people around the broken temple tomorrow. Don't take it lightly. Fang Yuan frowned and analyzed. Xuetong and Xiaomu's cultivation is still low, so they stay in the Linli building. Chu Qingning and I will go there. As for who will contact Satrap Yen, Chu Qingning and Fang Yuan looked at each other, and both of them were not sure. They had made good progress in cultivation recently, but they had not reached the peak of the acquired realm. If they met Satrap Yen, they were afraid that they would be easily exposed. Where is Luo Yichen? Su Lee raised her eyebrows and said, "In the martial arts field in the backyard of the Linli building." Mei Ruhan sat at a small table to do accounts. Luo Yichen's upper body was naked. The hot sweat dripped along the perfect muscle lines to the ground. As he punched the wooden pile, he was calm and happy. It seemed that there would be no problem for him to live like this until the end of time. At this moment, Haydn's head suddenly stretched out from the door and shouted, "Boss Luo, the bosses are looking for you." Mei Ruhan was looking at Luo Yichen in a daze. She was suddenly awakened by the voice. She was scared like a frightened deer and quickly lowered her head to pretend to do the accounts. Luo Yichen looked back and couldn't help but smile. When he turned his head again, he had calmed down and a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. "Take me there." It had been more than a month. Did the woman finally give him a task again? Since he recovered, he hadn't done anything. He hoped that this task wouldn't let her down. At least it could prove that he didn't stay in the Linli building for nothing. Every time Luo Yichen saw that Chu Qingning and others were busy while he was idle, he would naturally feel uncomfortable. It seemed that he hadn't been completely trusted by the girl. But he was also like a dull gourd. It was impossible for him to take the initiative to ask for a task like Chu Qingning did. Luo Yichen got dressed and followed Haydn all the way to the door of the addendum. His pupils shrank slightly. He had lived here for 2 months, but he didn't know that there was an addendum in the Linli building. "Boss Luo, Boss Li lets you in, which means that she has completely trusted you. Don't let her down." Haydn smiled and opened the door of the addendum. He beckoned Luo Yichen to go in. Luo Yichen snorted and didn't answer. He walked in with his head held high. Although he couldn't tell Chu Qingning and others about his origin, he disdained to bite the hand that fed him. "Oh, I'm coming, Luo Laosi." Seeing Luo Yichen coming in, Chu Qingning immediately put his arm around Luo Yichen's shoulder and said, "You could have come here a long time ago. Unfortunately, there are no decent tasks recently. Now, here comes a task." Luo Yichen couldn't help but ask. He immediately looked at Su Li sitting in the middle. He couldn't help but slightly open his thin lips and his eyes were full of shock. She didn't wear a veil. She looked younger than me. Who was a little beautiful, although not as lovely as Ruin. For a moment, Luo Yichen had countless thoughts in his mind. But his knowledge in the Qinghe town was limited, so he didn't know that Su Li had other identities. At midnight tomorrow, there will be a confrontation in the Ruin Temple in the mountain outside the Qinghe town. You should be more familiar with that place than any of us. Luo Yichen nodded. He had lived there for nearly half a year. Of course, he was familiar with that place. Su Li crossed her fingers and leaned on the back of the chair. She smiled slightly and said, "Your task is to contact the people of the satrap's mansion and the Qinghe girls' school as the protector of the Linli building tomorrow. Then, together with the soldiers, you will secretly protect the female lecturer of the Qinghe girls' school who is going to negotiate with the thieves. Do you understand?" Luo Yichen's pupils shrank slightly and he said, "I will contact the people of the satrap's mansion?" He was a fugitive. Wasn't it a little too bold to contact the people of the government? "Don't worry, fourth brother." Chu Qingning smiled and made a circle with his fingers. He said, "An appearance disguise pill will make Ruhan unable to recognize you." Luo Yichen's expression was slightly relaxed. He forgot that Su Li's medical skills were extremely profound. An appearance disguise pill was nothing to her. Su Li took out the green porcelain bottle and threw it to Luo Yichen. She was no longer lazy and reminded seriously, "Be careful tomorrow. It is not ruled out that there will be an inborn expert involved in this matter. If you put your life first, I don't want to see the Linli building, which has just made some progress, to suffer losses." Hearing that, everyone was shocked and nodded slightly. Luo Yichen pinched the porcelain bottle in his hand and there was an inexplicable emotion in his heart. Usually, except for Chu Qingning who was easy to get along with, Fang Yuan and Fang Mu regarded him as a waste. They didn't regard him as a new force of the Linli building at all. Even the lowest-level waiters of the Linli building had some complaints about him, but they didn't say it in front of him. Mei Ruhan heard a lot of complaints, but she preferred to be wronged alone and never mentioned it to him. This time, the Linli building seemed to have a collective action. He could finally show his cultivation and really get the respect of Fang Yuan and the people of the Linli building. Thinking of this, Luo Yichen was looking forward to the next day. Fang Yuan and others noticed the excitement in Luo Yichen's heart. They were all confused. Did Luo Yichen really want to devote himself to the Linli building until his last breath? It was okay for them to take revenge, but why did Luo Yichen do it? The next day, the Qinghe town was bustling as usual. Ordinary people lived their own lives and didn't notice that the governor of the Linli building was facing an unprecedented crisis today. "Zai, check the number of troops again." Yan Shixuan ordered. He looked serious and was a little upset. He always felt that things would not be as simple as he thought. If the enemy deliberately exposed their position, they could set up an ambush. But if it was so easy to deal with them, would Wu Yun still be Wu Yun? "Dad, we have checked 5 times. They are all the direct elite soldiers of the mansion. The news is also tightly blocked. There can be no traitors." Yan Zai was dressed in a suit, and Yan Hongxiu, who was also dressed as a martial arts practitioner, followed him. When Yan Shixuan saw Yan Hongxiu, he immediately frowned and said, "Hongxiu, what are you doing here? Go back to accompany your mother." Hongxiu suddenly curled her lips and said, "No. I want to go too. Why can the third brother go but I can't? I can already draw this bow halfway. Its deterrent power is no worse than that of Dad." Hongxiu pointed to the silver bow behind her and said angrily. Chapter 132. "Lord, the people of the Linli building are coming." Just when Yan Shixuan and his daughter were staring at each other, a subordinate reported. Yan Shixuan immediately came to his sense and then said with a very solemn expression, "Hongxiu, you stay. I also have an important task for you. After we leave, the defense of the satrap's mansion will be weak. You use the bow in your hand to protect the satrap's mansion and mother. Can you do it?" Seeing Yan Shixuan's serious expression for the first time, Yan Hongxiu was immediately filled with a great sense of responsibility. She nodded happily and said, "Dad, don't worry. I won't even let a mosquito into the satrap's mansion." Good. You deserve to be my good daughter. Yen Shishuan praised and immediately asked someone to take Yen Hongxiu to make arrangements. Yen Zai saw that his sister was cheated by his father to stay. He couldn't help crying and laughing. At this time, his father didn't forget to tease his sister. It was really, "Do you think I am joking?" A serious voice suddenly came. Yen Zai's expression changed. He raised his head and wondered, "Isn't it?" Yen Shishuan sighed softly and said with a complicated expression, "It is an impossible promise to pull the bow." But she met Mr. Li and the impossible became possible. In this case, there is no reason for me to stop her. I will go back to persuade her mother. Yen Zai had goosebumps all over his body. He couldn't help but say excitedly, "Then Yen Shishuan smiled softly and didn't know what expression he had. He said, "As for you, if you can pass this time safely, I won't stop you. But my Xiangong is a taboo. If you want to improve your cultivation, go to the Linli building. Thank you, Dad." Yen Zai immediately knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Yen Shishuan shook his head. He didn't know whether his sudden decision was right or not. He once vowed that he would never get involved in the affairs of that circle again. But both of his children were eager to learn martial arts. In front of the gate of the satrap's mansion, Luo Yichen stood in a group of elite soldiers and quietly waited for the arrival of Yen Shishuan. He looked around with a pair of bright eyes. He was familiar with many of these elite soldiers. Half a year ago, he was chased like a mouse. "Haha, you must be the 4th Protector Chen that Mr. Li mentioned, right? What a young hero." Luo Yichen looked up and saw Yen Shishuan in casual clothes coming over with a smile. Yen Shishuan looked friendly. He felt extremely dangerous from Luo Yichen. Although they were both at the peak of the acquired realm, they were not at the same level. In other words, Yen Shishuan's potential had been exhausted, and he would be stuck at the peak of the Hotian realm for the rest of his life. However, the grim-faced youth in front of him had already reached the threshold of the peak of the Hotian realm. It seemed as if he only needed to pierce through a piece of paper to easily step into the Xiantian realm. Even the 4 protectors of the Linli building have such a cultivation. It's really horrible. How many young masters are there in the Linli building? Yen Shishuan was shocked and couldn't help but think so. But she didn't know that Luo Yichen was the most powerful person in the entire Linli building except Su Li. Being praised by Yen Shishuan, Luo Yichen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he saw Yen Shishuan 2 months ago, he would definitely run away. But now, he was not nervous. Instead, he slightly cupped his hands and replied in a low voice, "I'm flattered." Seeing that Luo Yichen was not good with words, but was not so difficult to get along with, Yen Shishuan was relieved. He asked Luo Yichen to wait for a while, and then he summoned all the elite soldiers. A group of hundreds of people quietly went out of the city from the secret passage to the ruined temple. In the blink of an eye, it was already dark. At the city gate, Su Li drove the carriage slowly away from the Qinghe town. When Ruomin looked at the carriage going away, she clenched her hands, and her palms could not stop sweating. "Don't let anything happen." Su Li looked calm and lowered her head to touch the amulet on her chest. She had returned the amulet to Wen Ruomin after she came back. Now Wen Ruomin gave it to her again. Luo Yichen, who was waiting outside the city gate, saw the carriage coming and immediately became spirited. Coming. On the way, he left Yen Shishuan's team. After familiarizing himself with the environment from the ruined temple to the Qinghe town gate, he came back and hid in the weeds beside the official road, quietly waiting for the female lecturer to appear. After all, his task was different from that of the government. He was mainly entrusted to protect others' safety. The carriage slowly approached. Luo Yichen looked tense and was about to follow it secretly. But when he saw the girl in the carriage, he suddenly stopped and fell into a dull look. Then he felt a deep pain in the balls and didn't know where to start. What the fuck was actually Li? Since she was in the carriage, what was the use of squatting here for a long time like a fool? Don't give yourself away. I am the lecturer of the girls' school who needs to be protected. At this time, Su Li transmitted the sound in silence to him. Luo Yichen was stunned and his eyes were shining. He had no time to think too much and immediately followed her secretly. The ruined temple was built on the mountain, and the road was not very smooth. Su Li had to give up the carriage and walk to the back road. Under the cover of the night, the forest with mottled shadows was unspeakably gloomy and horrible. Looking at the timid fear on Su Li's face, Luo Yichen, who followed her secretly, was even more painful. Her acting skills were even more terrible than her cultivation. If he didn't know Su Li's other identity first, he couldn't believe that this seemingly weak girl turned out to be a temperamental witch. The hour gradually approached. After a seemingly difficult trek, Su Li finally arrived at the ruined temple. Squeak! The harsh sound of pushing the door came from Su Li's hand, which shocked the elite soldiers lurking around. After the door was opened, they didn't see a figure. The beggars who usually stayed here didn't know where they went. Su Li walked in with a frightened face and kept looking around, but she knew in her heart that there was no one here at all. Unless the person was beyond the inborn realm, he couldn't hide from her. Walking into the ruined temple, Su Li saw the strange red paper on the ground, which couldn't be more conspicuous. She immediately walked over and picked it up and opened it. You are really a smart and brave little girl. When you see this paper, it shows that you are still a little filial. If you want to save your father's family, come out of the ruined temple now. Don't talk to anyone. Get on the fast horse at the foot of the mountain in the north of the temple as fast as you can. It will take you to see me. If you dare to say a word, wait to collect your father's corpse. The law of the Dahan country won't care about your feelings. Su Li's eyes flashed after seeing it. She immediately ran down the north side of the cliff. Sure enough, she saw a lonely horse tied to a tree. This group of horses was very handsome. At first glance, she knew that they were extremely fast horses. Su Li did not hesitate to get on the horse. The horse seemed to be controlled by drugs. After Su Li sat on it, she immediately ran wildly and disappeared into the depths of the forest. Oh no! Yan Shishuan, who caught up with Su Li, suddenly changed his face when he saw Su Li ran away. At this time, Yan Zai hurried over with the red paper in his hand. Dad, look! Yan Shishuan took it and read it. He was angry and sighed, this silly girl. She is going to die in vain. She can't save her father at all. He wanted to seize this opportunity to catch Wu Yun. Although they would inevitably face the threat of the Gong family in the future, at least they could solve this crisis. But Wu Yun's cunning and ruthlessness were far beyond his calculation. By the way, where is Protector Qin? Yan Shishuan suddenly remembered. He turned around and looked around. It was quiet and there seemed to be no one around. Seeing this, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope in his heart. Protector Qin, it's up to you this time. On the mountain road, Luo Yichen silently followed the marks made by Su Li all the way. He cursed the horse in his heart. It had been running wildly for an hour. Even he couldn't bear it, let alone an ordinary horse. He didn't want to follow her. If Su Li couldn't beat the horse, he would just be a dead end. But before Su Li left, she transmitted the sound to him in silence and asked him to follow her secretly. He could only bitterly chase a horse and eat the dust. Su Li sat on the horse, and the scenery around her passed by at a very fast speed. At the same time, she also sensed that the breath of the horse under her was declining at a speed visible to the naked eye. This means, I didn't expect that Wu Yun had something to do with those rats. Su Li's eyes flashed with a glimmer of interest, and then she recovered her pale face in an instant. The horse was about to die. If there was no accident, they should arrive at their destination. Wheezing, the horse panted violently, and its speed was getting slower and slower. Luo Yichen could hear it from a distance. He immediately became alert and lightened his steps. He poured the water in the depression beside the mountain on his body to cover the smell of sweat, and then quietly followed up. Plop! The horse under her fell to the ground, and Su Li staggered and was thrown out. She fell awkwardly beside a wooden house by a small river. The gravel on the ground rubbed her arms and made them bleed. Su Li bowed her head and cried out in pain. When she heard the sound of the wooden door opening, she suddenly looked at the wooden door uneasily like a frightened rabbit. Squeak! A short old man dressed in a gray robe slowly walked out of the door. His turbid pupils glowed with green light, which didn't look like a human's eyes. At this moment, he looked at Su Li as if he was looking at delicious food. "Ha, you are really a good little girl. I know your meat is tender and delicious." The old man in a gray robe laughed gloomily with yellow teeth. Then Su Li saw that he took out a lump of black plaster from under his robe and said impatiently, "Well done. The amount of this medicine is enough to poison all the people in the satrap's mansion. I can't wait to enjoy the sacrifice. Get out of here." Wu Yun was overjoyed when she heard the words. She immediately took the poison invitation respectfully, and the fear in her eyes increased. She stepped back again and again. "In this case, master, I'm leaving." As she said, she carefully put away the poison and glanced at Su Li quite happily. Then she left along the night road without saying anything. She didn't want to stay here even for one more second. Only Su Li and the old man in a gray robe were left in the field. The old man in a gray robe was more excited. Looking at Su Li, who was kneeling on the ground like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, as if she was too scared to stand up straight, he happily took a bottle of bone-softening powder from the house. At the same time, he shook his left sleeve, revealing a shining claw blade instead of his hand. "Hum hum hum hum. Baby, don't be afraid." The old man in a gray robe came to Su Li and hummed. He pinched Su Li's mouth with his right hand and poured the bone-softening powder into her mouth. After Su Li ate the bone-softening powder, the old man in a gray robe was completely relaxed. But the claw blade in his left hand was aimed at the skin between Su Li's neck, and he was about to cut it. At this moment, a cold light flashed and instantly penetrated the old man's throat. Even Su Li's eyes were still full of fear, and there was no murderous intention. The old man in a gray robe was shocked. His hands trembled and he wanted to pull out the dagger in his neck, but he didn't dare to. He made a ho-ho sound in his throat, and his eyes were full of disbelief. He was actually plotted against by a young girl who had no strength to truss a chicken. It was too much. Su Li in front of him didn't have any fear and uneasiness at all. He even saw that she nimbly took out a dagger from nowhere and stabbed it into his heart. Although you may not be good at the tricks of the Lianshi cult, you still have to guard against them. Su Li spat out the bone-softening powder in her mouth and sneered. "How do you know that I am?" The old man in a gray robe widened his eyes and died before he finished his words. Su Li pulled out the dagger in the heart of the old man in a gray robe. Seeing the dark red blood with 60% gray flowing out, she slightly narrowed her eyes. She didn't expect that it was a big fish. According to the words of the Lianshi cult, the ability of the old man should be comparable to the inborn seventh hurdle. Unfortunately, he lost his vigilance in front of Su Li and died here without using 1% of his strength. Clatter! Luo Yichen, who was covered with dirty water, came out of the forest. When he saw the old man in a gray robe who had become a corpse on the ground, he breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but feel discouraged. As expected, with Su Li he had no chance to fight at all. Only the one in his hand could be counted as a result. Chapter 133. Hearing the movement, Su Li turned around and glanced at Luo Yichen. She gently wiped the blood on the two daggers on the chest of the old man in a gray robe and took them back. Luo Yichen put down Wu Yun and walked to Su Li to look at the old man in a gray robe. But because of his limited knowledge, he didn't see anything. "Did you see anyone else along the way?" After dealing with the body of the old man in a gray robe, Su Li turned around and asked. Seeing Su Li's skillful and casual movements, Luo Yichen was slightly shocked and shook his head quickly. "No." Su Li's expression showed a touch of understanding, and she pondered a little more. She thought that Wu Yun was the initiator of stealing official silver in the Qinghe town. Now seeing the old man in a gray robe, she suddenly found that things were not as simple as she thought. It was very likely that Wu Yun was just a puppet and the blood refining hall was the real manipulator behind the scenes. Trouble. Su Li frowned. She absolutely didn't want to see the forces of the martial arts circle so early. The Linli building was just starting out. It was like a baby who had just learned to crawl in front of the blood refining hall. Thinking of this, Su Li got up and walked to the cabin. Although the old man in a gray robe set some small traps, it was not a problem for the experienced Su Li. After searching the cabin carefully, Su Li found no clues except a few secret letters between the old man in a gray robe and Wu Yun. Soon, the cabin was on fire. Su Li held the torch and her eyes were shining. No one knew what she was thinking. Luo Yichen held Wu Yun under his armpit with one hand and stood aside. He wanted to urge Su Li to leave immediately for several times, but he swallowed the words. Looking at the fire, it was not difficult for Su Li to know that Yan Shixuan and others were coming. It would be too late if they didn't leave now. When she was thinking of this, suddenly there was a rustle in the forest. Two young figures came out. They were Chu Qingning and Fang Yuan. Seeing that Su Li and Luo Yichen were safe and Wu Yun was caught, they were relieved. Have the marks along the way been destroyed? Su Li suddenly asked, but Chu Qingning smiled and said, Of course, we still have a little vigilance. Luo Yichen blushed and felt ashamed secretly. His family background determined that he could not be as careful as Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning. He never thought about the problem of marking on the road all the way. Fang Yuan, you and Chu Qingning leave secretly with Wu Yun. Don't disturb Yan Shixuan. Su Li's expression was indifferent, but her tone was a little urgent. She pointed to another path that couldn't be walked by horses and signaled Fang Yuan and Bai Xiaoshuang to leave quickly. Then she picked up the claw knife that hadn't been melted on the ground and pulled it fiercely to her left arm. Poochie! A bloody wound appeared on the outside of his right arm, extending from his wrist to his shoulder. It was deep and long. The sound of blood splattering caused the eyebrows of the three youths to twitch. They felt a chill in their hearts. Even if they were pretending to be injured, there was no need to be so ruthless, right? The wound was so big that one could almost peel off his skin. The severe pain stimulated Su Li to frown slightly. Seeing that Fang Yuan and Su Li didn't leave, she immediately raised her eyebrows and said with slight anger, What are you waiting for? Let's go. Fang Yuan woke up immediately. He took Luo Yichen, Wu Yun and Chu Qingning and disappeared on the path. At the moment when he passed by Luo Yichen, his lips buzzed, but no sound came out. Take care of her. Suddenly receiving the sound transmitted by Fang Yuan, Luo Yichen was surprised and immediately laughed. It turned out that this blockhead was interested in Su Li. Luo Yichen, carry me on your back to meet Yan Shixuan later and say this. Su Li threw the claw knife into the sea of fire and destroyed it. Then she told Luo Yichen again. Then she swallowed a mass of white powder and fell into his arms in astonishment. No wonder you want me to carry her on my back. Luo Yichen was just wondering that Su Li's right arm was injured and he only needed to hold her. Why was she so delicate that he had to carry her on his back? It turned out that she was going to swallow the bone-softening powder. Such a large amount was enough for ordinary people to sleep for a day and a night. Even a senior of the inborn realm would be powerless for a while. Was she really not afraid that he would take the opportunity to do something? Taking a deep breath, Luo Yichen did not forget to simply bandage Su Li's arm. Then he carried Su Li on his back and walked back. He whispered, The situation forced me to do so. This is not a betrayal of Ruhan. Su Li lowered her head weakly, but there was a trace of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She did this to create the illusion that the death of the elder of the Lianshi cult had nothing to do with the Qinghe town. But she was also taking the opportunity to test Luo Yichen. Fortunately, Luo Yichen did not let her down. Luo Yichen carried Su Li on his back for a while. Finally, he saw the elite soldiers looking for them in the forest. He took the initiative to show up. The elite soldiers were overjoyed and immediately shouted, Lord, come quickly. We found Miss Su Li. The transmission speed was very fast. In less than 5 minutes, Yan Shixuan appeared in front of Luo Yichen. Seeing the blood stains on the two people, his face suddenly changed. He stepped forward to check Su Li's breath. After knowing that the latter was still alive, he was relieved and quickly said, Thank you for your help, Protector Chen. Don't hesitate. Send Su Li to be healed quickly. Let's talk about other things later. Luo Yichen nodded and said, It's reasonable. After a busy night, in the satrap's mansion, the old doctor stroked his beard and said with a smile, Workshop owner Su's injury this time is much lighter than last time. But she lost too much blood and a large dose of knockout drug in her body. So, She will not wake up for a while. But these are all trivial matters. I will prescribe a prescription to help workshop owner Su recover. Yen Shixuan was overjoyed when he heard that. He repeatedly held his hands and said, "Thank you for your hard work. This way, please." Yen Shixuan left with the doctor. Yen Hongxiu looked at Su Li, who was lying on the bed with her eyes closed and face pale. Her eyes were red. Last time, Su Li was injured for no reason because of the Jin family. This time, she was cut for helping them. What if there was a scar in such an obvious position in the future? After Yen Shixuan sent the doctor away, the smile on his face disappeared. He returned to a dignified expression and came to the front hall. Luo Yichen, who had been waiting here for a long time, immediately stood up and pretended to be concerned. "Is the miss okay?" Yen Shixuan smiled bitterly and said, "Protector Chen is as kind as Mr. Li. The miss is fine. Thank you for waiting for me for a long time. Now can you tell me what happened last night?" Luo Yichen felt strange when he was praised for being kind. But he still looked serious and followed Su Li's instructions. He said, "Last night, I felt something was wrong and tried my best to catch up with her. But I was still late." Yen Shixuan frowned more and more. In Luo Yichen's words, Su Li was a lamb at the mercy of others. He didn't know what kind of medicine she was fed. Her whole body was soft. And a black-robed man was cutting her arms slowly with a claw knife. Yen Shixuan immediately went to stop him, but he couldn't stop the black-robed man. Considering Su Li's injury, he went back directly. It could be said that except for saving Su Li, Luo Yichen didn't find anything helpful to the case. Yen Shixuan didn't doubt that Luo Yichen lied. Because the Linli building didn't need to hide any news. The Yen family and the Linli building were now in the same boat. Well, it's lucky that workshop owner Su can survive. Yen Shixuan smiled bitterly and said, "The Gong family deserves to be an aristocratic family in Yunjing. I admit defeat." "Lord Yen, you don't need to belittle yourself." Luo Yichen's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, "Although I can't see the background of the black-robed man who escaped, they are likely to come from the martial arts circle, not the subordinates of Madame Wu Yun. I'm afraid that my master can explain this specific speculation to you." Yen Shixuan's expression changed dramatically. He was shocked and said, "The power of the martial arts circle? How is it possible? How can the Yen family provoke such a giant?" Luo Yichen didn't say much. He stood up and cupped his fists and said, "I've said what I should say. If you want to know more, you might as well wait for Miss Su to wake up and bring her to the Linli building. My master can infer more things." Yen Shixuan came to his sense and quickly stood up to thank him. "Protector Chen, it's really thanks to you this time. I can't thank you enough. After Su Li wakes up, I will definitely visit her." After a night, Su Li opened her eyes faintly, which made many people who cared about her feel relieved. Yen Shixuan hurried over and looked a little guilty and hesitant. He wanted to take Su Li to the Linli building immediately. But when he saw Su Li's tightly wrapped left arm, he felt embarrassed to say it. Su Li showed a weak smile and said softly, "Satrap Yen, you can say it directly." Although Su Li was frightened this time, she was not seriously hurt. "Hongxiu has just told me that the matter of the official silver has not been solved. If there is anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask." Yen Shixuan thought about it and turned his head to stare at Yen Hongxiu, who was guarding the bed. Yen Hongxiu lowered her head aggrievedly. It was Su Li who asked her. How could she not say it? It couldn't be hidden. Looking at Su Li's pleading eyes, Yen Shixuan sighed and said, "Su Li, my Yen family is sorry to you and your Su family. You just woke up, but I have to take you to a place immediately." After 10 minutes, Su Li stood in front of the Linli building with her left arm hanging. She felt a little strange in her heart. It was the first time for her to come here as Su Li. Yin Xuedong, who had been waiting in front of the door, saw Yen Shixuan and Su Li. She immediately stepped forward and bowed slightly. "My master has been waiting for you on the top floor for a long time." Then, Yin Xuedong stepped aside and reached out her hand to lead the way. Yen Shixuan said, "Thank you." Then he took Su Li upstairs. When they came to the attic on the top floor, Yen Shishuan found that there was a thick gauze curtain in the open space in front of the desk. It was faintly seen that a woman was sitting inside. Two expressionless young men stood on both sides of the gauze curtain as if strangers were not allowed to enter. Lord Yen, I have been practicing martial arts to a critical point recently. It is not suitable for me to see others and affect my state of mind. If Protector Chen didn't say that, I would not force myself to come out. Let's talk like this today. The familiar voice came out from the gauze curtain. Yen Shishuan was relieved. It was taboo to ask others about their practice. He directly cupped his hands and said, I will comply with your request. But do you have any thoughts about what Protector Chen said last night? Pa, I just guessed it. But when I saw the girl's face, I was sure that it was those rats who did it. The laughter in the gauze curtain made Yen Shishuan's heart skip a beat. He asked in a deep voice, Who did it? Please tell me clearly. The girl's face is pale. It seems that she has lost too much blood. But if you look carefully, you can see that there is a blue color between her eyebrows and red hair on her temples. She has been fed the bone-softening powder. The bone-softening powder is not a common drug. It is effective even for the inborn realm. It is very valuable. There are few forces who can feed the bone-softening powder to a little girl regardless of the weight. With the analysis of the voice in the gauze curtain, the truth seemed to be peeled off and gradually became clear. Yen Shishuan's face became more and more ugly. At the same time, he faintly relaxed. Satrap Yen, is the wound on the girl's left arm very deep and long, and the wound is extremely smooth from top to bottom? Yen Shishuan immediately nodded and said, Mr. Li's description is extremely accurate. It seems that you saw it with your own eyes. Chu Qingning, who was standing beside the gauze curtain and disguised, couldn't help but secretly pout his mouth. He not only saw it with his own eyes, but also made the wound by himself. How could it not be accurate? That's right. Paralyze the whole body with the bone-softening powder and then peel off the skin and flesh to make the puppet of the living dead. This is the method of the Lianshi cult. The members of the Lianshi cult probably fancy the girl's appearance and want to make her into a puppet to keep them by their side to appreciate. The tone in the gauze curtain was light, but everyone present felt numb. Corpse Refinement Sect. Just by listening to it, one could tell that this sect was definitely not a righteous sect. The Lianshi cult. Yen Shishuan's face was ugly. He finally sighed and stood up. He held his hands and said, Wu Yun also disappeared. It is difficult to solve the problem of the official silver. Please tell me how to solve it. Ho ho! Chapter 134. Hearing Mr. Li's words, Yen Shishuan was tense for a moment and then relaxed. He said with a wry smile, You are right. It is not the time to investigate my dereliction of duty. Today I will report the matter to the imperial court and wait for the punishment. Lord Yen, Su Li was moved. When she was about to say something, a voice came from the gauze tent. Lord Yen, don't worry. The power of the Lianshi cult is beyond your imagination. As long as Su Li testifies, your Yen family will not be affected. However, it is hard to say what will happen to those families who have cooperated with the Lianshi cult. Thank you, Mr. Li. Yen Shishuan didn't show any optimism when he heard the words in the gauze tent. He just got up and cupped his hands. Then he left with Su Li in a hurry. After Su Li left, everyone was relaxed. Chu Qingning also took off the gauze tent. Fong Ling, who was wearing the clothes of Mr. Li, was sitting inside. She held a shell-like poisonous insect in her hand. She ran to Fong Yuan proudly and said, Eldest brother, did I act like her? Fong Yuan smiled softly and shook his head helplessly. There was no need to act. Fong Ling just sat there and didn't move. But he still praised, You are very good. My Ling is the best. Fong Ling immediately smiled happily. She carefully put the poisonous insect back into the brocade box on the desk and then went to work. I didn't expect that Su Li has such a magical poisonous insect. I have been in the Nanjiang country for more than 10 years, but I have never seen it. Chu Qingning looked at the sound acquaintance and clicked his tongue in wonder. Fong Yuan was calm. He was not surprised by how many magical things the magical girl had. He just felt that he seemed to have seen this poisonous insect before, but he couldn't remember it. Maybe in a dream. Fang Yuan smiled and didn't think too much. Luo Yichen glanced at the two people who were still busy cleaning up and went downstairs to find Mei Ruhan. After he came back, the scene that Su Li cut herself with the claw knife without hesitation always appeared in his mind. There was no fear in her eyes. Luo Yichen couldn't help but tremble in his heart. She was as calm as eating and drinking. What a ruthless woman. No matter to the enemy or to herself. Ruhan is better. Su Li lived under the heavy protection of the Yen mansion for 7 days, and then she got the news from the imperial court. Su Li, it's great. Not only did the imperial court not blame my father, but they also sent the chancellor of the Supreme Court to help solve the case. I heard that there were many masters accompanying him to deal with the Lianshi cult. Yen Hongxiu couldn't keep secrets. As soon as she heard it from Yen Zai, she immediately came to tell Su Li. Su Li was relieved when she heard the words. Even if she was 90% sure, there was still a 10% chance of an accident. Fortunately, she was not so unlucky this time. Yen Shixuan was also smart. He had blocked the news from the imperial court and turned a blind eye to the arrogant coercion of the Jin and Lin clans. He even pretended that nothing had happened when many of his properties were forcibly seized. The Jin family and the Lin family thought that the Yen family had completely admitted defeat, so they became even more arrogant. Although they could not contact Wu Yun all of a sudden, the Yen family's various cowardice showed signs of admitting defeat. After Su Li's arm got better, she left the Yen mansion and returned to the school. She was finally free and returned to the Linli building. In the underground adytum, Su Li looked at Wu Yun, who was muddle-headed and demented. Although Wu Yun was stubborn, few people could keep their secrets under the influence of her ecstasy poison. We got the whereabouts of the official silver. But when we went to investigate, there was no one there. Obviously, the Lianshi cult noticed it. Fang Yuan added. Su Li nodded slightly and said, it would be strange if they were still there. The official silver handed over to the imperial court every year is usually tens of millions of taels. With their connections in the martial arts circle, they can exchange it for a large number of practicing resources. It is impossible for them to let go. But how did they transport so much silver that night? Tens of millions of taels of silver are hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Fang Yuan frowned tightly. This was the only thing he couldn't figure out. Su Li smiled and said softly, a warrior in the inborn first hurdle can carry thousands of kilograms. Yesterday, the old man in the gray robe was in the inborn 7th hurdle and was proficient in the skill of corpse control. It was not difficult for him to carry things of hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Fang Yuan suddenly understood and was slightly shocked. The old man who was killed and destroyed by Su Li last night had such a horrible cultivation. What was Su Li's cultivation? Seeing that Fang Yuan was absent-minded, Su Li didn't expose him. She told him to take good care of Wu Yun and not to kill her. Then she returned to the school. Calculating the time, the people of the imperial court should arrive. There were many useless officers in the supreme judiciary, but there were also many real experts in solving cases. The official silver was stolen, so the people who came must not be too bad. With such thoughts, an inconspicuous carriage finally stopped at the door of the secret door of the Yen mansion. A middle-aged guard disguised as an ordinary groom opened the curtain, and a young man with an indifferent expression got off the carriage. The young man's face was not handsome, but very good-looking. Especially the pair of strange lavender eyes, from which the sharp and wise eyes seemed to be able to see through the stars and penetrate the starry sky. He was obviously a young man in his early 20s, but people felt that he was more like a wise old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. He exuded an unfathomable pneuma as high as the mountain and as deep as the sea. Behind the young man, another teenager came down. He also wore casual clothes. Although he looked handsome, his temperament was much more ordinary than that of the young man. However, he also had vitality and potential that the young man didn't have. This is the Qinghe provincial mansion. A faint light flashed in the young man's eyes, but there were infinite emotions in the teenager's eyes. He said, Qinghe provincial mansion, I am back again. The middle-aged guard took out a bundle from the carriage, and then the three people were secretly welcomed in by the satrap's mansion. Satrap Yen was full of anxiety and paced back and forth in the room. When he saw the housekeeper leading the three people in, he immediately greeted them and said to the middle-aged guard, "Your Excellency, you come from afar. The situation is special. I can't let you come in from the front door. I'm sorry." The middle-aged guard looked cold and raised his eyebrows. He let the young man appear in front of Satrap Yen and said, "Lord Yen, this is the imperial envoy from the Supreme Judiciary in Yunjing." There was a moment of silence, and the atmosphere was extremely embarrassing. The young man had a gentle smile on his face, and he was not angry at being recognized. He gently patted the folding fan in his hand and said in a magnetic voice like spring breeze, "Lord Yen, I am Ling Qinglun, the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. This time, I come to investigate the case of the theft of official silver. Please cooperate with me." When Yen Shishuan heard the name of the young man, he was shocked. He was happy and flattered and said, "I don't dare. It turns out that you are the first young master in solving cases in Yunjing. With Milord taking action, we will definitely be able to recover the stolen official silver." Ling Qinglun kept smiling and said, "It's hard to say. Your Excellency said in the book that some forces of the martial arts circle intervened. Cases with the intervention of the martial arts circle are very troublesome." Yen Shishuan smiled bitterly and inadvertently looked at the young man behind Ling Qinglun. He couldn't help but frown. Why did he look a little familiar? Noticing Yen Shishuan's gaze, Ling Qinglun pulled the young man out and said with a smile, "I forgot to introduce him. He is the newly promoted officer of the Supreme Judiciary this year. He is from your Qinghe province." Yen Shishuan was shocked and looked at him carefully. The young man looked a little nervous, but he could still keep his composure. He raised his head and said, "Lord Yen, long time no see." After a year, the young man's face matured a lot. He changed the hairstyle of the Supreme Judiciary and grew a lot taller. But Yen Shishuan still recognized him. He pointed at the young man with great shock and said, You are Su Qingtan?" He recommended Su Qingtan to Yunjing personally. How could he forget him? But the time didn't match. Shouldn't Su Qingtan still be in the National Academy at this time? Su Qingtan smiled shyly and didn't explain. Ling Qinglun didn't give them time to continue to talk about the old days. He said with a smile, "It's not too late. How about taking us to see the injured female lecturer now?" That's right. Seeing Ling Qinglun's resolute action, Yen Shishuan was not surprised but happy. He quickly arranged a carriage to go to the Qinghe girls' school. Su Li was still quietly reading in the courtyard of the school and recuperating. This time, her injury would be left to the Supreme Judiciary as evidence. So, since she was injured, she blocked the circulation of genuine energy in her left arm. Although her recovery speed was fast because of her physical body, it was still within the range of normal people. Wow, the forest was rustling. Su Li's ears moved, and her pupils suddenly contracted. She lifted her feet and looked down. She saw a carriage stopped in front of the courtyard. 3 people got off, but she could only sense 2 breaths. It meant that the cultivation of the other person was at least the same as hers. What was more exaggerated was that the youngest among the 3 people was the eldest brother. This is Lecturer Su's courtyard. Yen Shishuan introduced with a smile and led Ling Qinglun and Su Qingtan in. Mammy Li greeted them and saluted quickly. Then she saw the teenager walking at the end. She suddenly widened her eyes and shouted, First master?" "What?" Yen Shishuan was shocked by the sudden address. "What first master?" Su Qingyan was also shocked and said, "Mammy Li, why are you here? What happened to second sister?" At this moment, Su Li appeared at the door. She stared at Su Qingtan, who was no longer childish. Her tears rolled down unconsciously. "Second sister!" Su Qingtan exclaimed and couldn't help but hug Su Li tightly. He was silent for a long time. Seeing this scene, Ling Qinglun raised his eyebrows, and Yen Shishuan was directly dumbfounded. He never thought that Su Qingtan and Su Li were from the same family. It was lucky that Su Li came from the Su family. How could there be a real dragon? But the fact slapped him hard. When he recommended Su Qingtan, he checked Su Qingtan's background. But he really didn't remember Su Qingtan's background because he was focused on whether Su Qingtan's background was clean or not. Second sister, your hand? Was it hit by your mother again? Su Qingtan's eyes were full of excitement. He was not as calm as before. The first time he saw his second sister was injured, which made him feel guilty. He once vowed that he would never let his second sister get hurt again. But in the past year, his second sister must have suffered a lot of grievances. Don't worry. This time I will take you to Yunjing. I can protect you and won't let you be bullied again. Eldest brother, I'm fine. Hearing the conversation between them, Ling Qinglan looked indifferent, but Yan Shishuan's face was a little dark. Su Li used to be beaten by her mother at home. Chapter 135. Eldest brother, it's really not what you think. I live a good life now. This was hurt by a thief. After Su Li explained, Su Qingtan stood aside in a daze. He didn't expect that not only he but also the second sister and the whole Su family had changed greatly after a year. Ling Qinglan didn't have time to pay attention to Su Qingtan and Yan Shishuan, who were in a daze. He gently untied the gauze wrapped around Su Li's left arm, revealing a long scab of blood. Su Qingtan was shocked. It was such a long and deep wound. How painful it must be. Su Li turned her head away and nibbled her lips. But she was thinking quickly. She was recalling whether there was any omission. At that time, although she scratched herself, she also paid attention to the direction of the hook. Even the coroner could not find any clue. But Ling Qinglan couldn't be underestimated. Such a young senior of the inborn realm, and his surname is Ling. Su Li recalled the seniors around him that Ling Li mentioned in the previous life. She matched them one by one and really found a role that matched the young man in front of her. He was the military counselor of the Yinma cult. Like the head of the Shalu cult, he was the right-hand man of Child Li. People called him Qinghu. His name also had Qing. However, she still needed to test whether they were the same person or not. After all, Ling Qinglan was a member of the Supreme Judiciary. Su Li thought of Su Qingtan again, and her heart sank. After the eldest brother went to Yunjing, he was bound to be involved in disputes. But she didn't expect that Su Qingtan would get involved before she left Qinghe province. After the investigation, Ling Qinglan didn't say any conclusion. He left Su Qingtan and Yan Shishuan to continue the investigation. You are involved in the case. This time you come here to visit your relatives. You can't intervene. Hearing Ling Qinglan's order, Su Qingtan's eyes dimmed. This was the first case after he became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. But the Su family was indeed involved in it. Even his father was locked in the prison of the satrap's mansion. It was really inappropriate for him to continue the investigation. It turns out that my father also changed your name. Su Li, it sounds much better than before. Yes, eldest brother. My family treats me very well. By the way, my mother also gave birth to the fifth sister. She is here. Mammy Li watched them talking and laughing outside the door. She couldn't help but secretly wipe her tears. It was great that the first master could come back. Although Miss had a lot of power in the dark, she couldn't use it in the open. She had to endure the bullying from First Madam and the others, but with young master around, things would be different. After chatting with Su Li for a long time and coaxing Su Li to sleep, Su Qingtan became serious. He went to the door and called Mammy Li to the room next door. Mammy Li, tell me how second sister has been living in the past year. Don't hide anything. Eldest young master, second miss has suffered too much this year. I almost died a few times. Mammy Li was on Su Li's side and immediately complained to Su Qingtan. Everything happened really. However, she also consciously concealed the other identity of Su Li and did not mention it at all. The more Su Qingtan listened, the gloomier his face became. Although Mammy Li's words were subjective, there were some things that didn't need to be investigated. She could know clearly by asking casually. Moreover, the second sister's status was not low now. There should be a file about her in the Tianya house. If she couldn't find it, she could buy it and read it. Bang. Su Qingten heard Mammy Li said that ma'am. Su Chui and Zhu Yan united to slander Su Li. They almost sent Su Li to the government office and drowned her in a pig cage, but Su Huanli turned a blind eye. Su Qingyan hammered the table fiercely and his eyes were red. He didn't understand why his family targeted second sister like this and even wanted to kill her. Second sister was so kind and naive. Even if she was treated like this, she still cared about her family. She even risked her life to sound out the enemy for his father and almost died in the hands of the enemy. I was born in the Su family. They are the elders. I can't do anything but since I am back. Su Qingtan's eyes flashed coldly. Ma'am. Su Chui, Zhu Yan, Su Zipei, don't touch second sister. Ling Qinglan went out of the city to investigate the case alone. He quickly changed his clothes and appeared in the adytum of the Tianya house. The middle-aged guard was also beside him. After reading the files about Su Li, Ling Qinglan was lost in thought. Su Li's life experience was very clean. As for the suffering she suffered in the past and the reason why the Su family hated her, the reason was unclear. When Su Li was Su area, she was simply an insignificant person. It was not worth the manpower and material resources of the Tianya house to collect information. Since there is no problem with Su Li, it is not good news that there are people of the Lianshi cult in the Qinghe town. Ling Qinglan frowned. He took the robe handed over by the middle-aged guard and put it on. Although he was in the inborn realm, his body was not good. Ling Li spent countless treasures to reach the inborn realm in order to compete with the ice toxin in his body. However, the growth rate of the ice toxin was increasing every year. He didn't tell Ling Li this news. Maybe there was a price to pay for any talent in the world. He got a brain that even Ling Li couldn't compare with, but he paid for his health. There were traders in the Qinghe province before. Although they were cleaned up by the people of the Shalu cult, many files were lost. Some of them were about the stronghold of the Lianshi cult. I didn't do a good job. Please punish me. Looking at the middle-aged scholar who knelt on the ground and shivered, Ling Qinglan responded calmly. He said indifferently, "Go and accept the punishment. As for the level of punishment, it is up to you." After rebuking the head of the branch, Ling Qinglan was lost in meditation for a long time. The middle-aged guard gently put the files about the Qinghe town on the table. Then he went out and closed the curtain, leaving Ling Qinglan alone. Ahem. After a long time, there was a cough in the room. The middle-aged guard immediately rushed in with an elixir bottle nervously. But he saw Ling Qinglan holding a file and laughing wildly. The Linli building? There is a mysterious force in the Qinghe town that even the Tianya house can't investigate. Interesting, interesting, ahem. Seeing Ling Qinglan coughed again, the middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and poured out a black elixir with a strong fragrance for him. Ling Qinglan took it and swallowed it. Then he stopped coughing. He shook his head angrily and said, "You are so sick. You are useless." The middle-aged guard shook his head silently. He remembered that his master vomited blood every day before he broke through the inborn hurdle and almost waited for death. But now his situation was much better. "Let's go to the Linli building with me," Ling Qinglan said. He took off his thick robe, opened the door and went out. At this moment in the Linli building, Su Li dressed as Mr. Li and was lost in thought in the dark night. If Ling Qinglan was Qinghu, he would definitely be interested in the Linli building after visiting the Tianya house. She was waiting, and she knew it wouldn't be long. Even Su Qingtan couldn't violate the rules of the Qinghe girls' school. What's more, Su Qingtan was originally from the Qinghe school. He couldn't disgrace the school. Therefore, he moved out this afternoon. But he came to visit frequently. So, Su Li was free at night. "Su Li, Ling Qinglan is here." Chu Qingning came up to report. Su Li nodded slightly. He immediately went to greet them. After a while, Ling Qinglan came to the attic and sat opposite to Su Li with a smile. He finally knew why the Tianya house couldn't find anything. Only the ordinary waiters didn't disguise themselves along the way. Those who had a profound breath had a thin layer of disguise on their faces. He could see it at a glance with his eyesight of the inborn realm. They all disguised themselves. It was impossible to find out their origins. What's more, it was a mystery whether the owner of the Linli building, Mr. Li, was a man or a woman. Although the Tianya house judged that the owner was a woman, he couldn't believe it. I'm Ling Qinglan, a junior. Nice to meet you, Mr. Li. Ling Qinglan's behavior was gentle and elegant. He always held the folding fan in his hand. He could be called a good child. Su Li smiled slightly. For the sake of caution, she manipulated sound acquaintance and replied, Child Ling, you are too modest. If the most outstanding detective in the Supreme Judiciary is also a latecomer, I am afraid that no one in the world can be called outstanding. Mr. Li is really well informed. Ling Qinglan didn't panic at all when his identity was exposed. Instead, he said with a smile, I heard that there is an excellent winery in the Qinghe town. After coming here and having a look, I really feel that it is very good. Although Ling Qinglan said those polite words, his heart slightly sank. The voice just now didn't seem to be a human's language. He couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman. It was not difficult for him to guess that the person in front of him must have used some means to communicate with others without making a sound. Tricky. Ling Qinglan felt that the person in front of him was tricky for the second time. The first time was when he met Ling Li. At that time, his health was too weak and he was not as calm as he was now. Mr. Li was really not easy to deal with. Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan continued to say, But don't you think that you have violated a taboo? What's the taboo? Su Li looked indifferent and said, He is just taken from the name of the winery. It has no other meaning. Will it offend others? Ling Qinglan looked at Su Li, who was wearing a veil. He slightly grasped the edge of the chair with his fingers and leaned forward. He said in a low voice, Mr. reminds me of Child Li, the hierarch of the Yinma cult in Jianghu. Is it possible that Mr. Li has a secret relationship with that hierarch? Giggle. Su Li suddenly trembled with laughter. The weird and indescribable voice made people's hair stand on end. If so, it is really big news in the martial arts circle. Su Li replied in a low voice and then said with a smile, It's a pity. Child Ling should know whether I have a relationship with hierarch or not. Ling Qinglan's pupils immediately contracted for a moment, but his expression didn't change. He still said with a smile, What are you talking about, Mr. Li? Why don't I understand what you're saying? How can I touch such a high and mighty sect master? Child Ling Qinglan, you can't touch him. There is still Qinghu. Su Li's tone was cold. Ling Qinglan's heart contracted violently. Did she know his real identity or guessed it? Although Ling Qinglan tried his best to keep his expression unchanged and even his breathing normal, the shock of his state of mind still affected the only variable. Ahem. Chapter 136. The expression of the middle-aged guard beside Ling Qinglan changed slightly. He was about to take out the elixir from his arms, but Ling Qinglan grabbed his clothes from behind. The middle-aged guard knew what his master meant. Although he was extremely worried, he had to stop. He made a mistake. Ling Qinglan stopped coughing and calmed down. But his heart was cold. From the beginning of the quarrel, he knew that Ms. Li was absolutely not a stupid opponent like those before. His coughing just now must have let Ms. Li see something. Although I don't want to bother Ling Mo, I may let the Shalu cult sound him out this time. Thinking of this, Su Li suddenly stood up and smiled apologetically. The joke is indeed too much. If Child Ling doesn't mind, please accept my apology gift. Ling Qinglan was slightly confused. Even as smart as he was, he didn't understand why Su Li was aggressive and forced him to a dead end, but she apologized and even offered a gift of apology in the next second. Child, please come with me. At this time, Su Li had already stood up to lead the way. Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked and alert, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he patted his folding fan and stood up. You don't have to apologize. But I'm interested to see what the gift is. Ms. Li, please lead the way. Su Li chuckled and went downstairs with Ling Qinglan. She was sure that the person was Qinghu. Although Ling Qinglan heard her words and disguised himself perfectly, and even his heartbeat didn't change, she was proficient in medicine and poison. That cough was enough to expose a lot. It turns out that Qinghu has a hidden disease. No wonder she died the earliest in the previous life. Su Li thought. She established the force to help him, but she could only be a spy. She couldn't do it openly. How to cure Ling Qinglan's injury without being noticed was still a problem. When she was thinking, they had come to the door of the adytum. Ling Qinglan narrowed his eyes slightly, but the middle-aged guard behind him had already stepped forward and stood in front of him. Su Li glanced back and said nothing. She opened the door of the adytum and walked in step by step. Ling Qinglan took a deep breath and started to follow her. The tunnel was very short and very quiet. There was no mechanism. Or, it didn't start. Ling Qinglan was slightly relieved. He was finally sure that at least now the Linli building was not hostile to the Yinma cult. Otherwise, if he went deep into the hinterland with only one guard, the Linli building would have 100 ways to kill him. Creak, Su Li opened a door and gestured to Ling Qinglan. She said softly, "This is an apology gift. Child Ling, please." Ling Qinglan walked closer and saw the situation in the room. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He said, "Wu Yun? It's actually here. Child, you should know that Lord Yen asked the Linli building to protect the little girl secretly." In fact, Wu Yun was also there that day, and it seemed that she had a good relationship with the Lianshi cult. Speaking of which, the Gong family has a good status in Yunjing, right? Hearing Su Li's words, Ling Qinglan was slightly embarrassed. The influence of the Tianya house almost penetrated into the streets and alleys of Yunjing. They knew the details of every aristocratic family very well, but they didn't find the connection between the Gong family and the Lianshi cult. Clearly, this was not normal. Feeling the seriousness of the matter, the smile on Ling Qinglan's face disappeared. He slightly made a fist and palm salute to Su Li and said, "Thank you, Ms. Li. I will remember this big gift. Can I take Wu Yun away?" Su Li nodded slightly and said in a relaxed tone, "This is an apology gift for Child Ling. Madame Gong is naturally at your disposal. But the Linli building also hopes that Child Ling will not bite the hand that feeds you. The Linli family is small and just wants to sell wine peacefully. But we can't stand the destruction of the Shalu cult. If we can meet in Yunjing in the future, I hope that you can be lenient and give the Linli building a way out." Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked. He didn't nod or shake his head. He asked the middle-aged guard to carry Wu Yun. After saying goodbye, he walked out of the Linli building. The carriage left quickly. The Tianya house was on the first-class street, only 2 streets away from the Linli building. The middle-aged guard deliberately took a few circles. After confirming that no one followed him, he entered the Tianya house through the secret door. As soon as he got off the carriage, he didn't care about Wu Yun, and immediately took out the elixir. Ling Qinglan shook his head and asked the middle-aged guard to put away the elixir. Then he asked him to carry Wu Yun down. The middle-aged guard sighed and didn't disobey. He put away the elixir and carried Wu Yun. Every medicine had some poison. Moreover, the fire elixir was used to suppress the cold poison. It was originally the fire poison. He also knew that the more his master ate, the closer he was to death. He didn't want his master to eat too much. But when he saw his master cough, he was afraid that his master couldn't maintain the balance of ice and fire and would freeze to death. After locking Wu Yun up, Ling Qinglan didn't interrogate her. It was important to investigate the Lianshi cult, but the Linli building couldn't be underestimated. According to Mr. Li's tone, it was obvious that Mr. Li had confirmed his identity, and he even knew the relationship between the Yinma cult and the Shalu cult. He even suspected that Mr. Li was very clear about the relationship between the Tianya house and the Yinma cult, and he was very familiar with the way the Tianya house collected information. Otherwise, it was impossible that the Tianya house couldn't find out his origin. The only thing to be thankful for is that the Linli building showed kindness. Otherwise, my identity will be exposed. Ling Qinglan muttered to himself. Just thinking about it made him feel numb. According to Mr. Li's tone, he will go to Yunjing in the future. If he really wants to sell wine peacefully, he doesn't need to go to such a chaotic and dangerous place. After thinking for half a day, Ling Qinglan sighed. He couldn't distinguish whether the Linli building was a friend or an enemy. But since the arrangement of the Shalu cult was exposed, he naturally didn't dare to act rashly without Ling Mo's knowledge. Forget it. Let's solve the matter of the Lianshi cult first. How can we allow others to sleep? Ling Qinglan's eyes were as cold as a knife. He said, "Those demons and monsters are too greedy." On the other side, in the Lin Li building, people watched Su Li give Wu Yun to Ling Qinglan. Their reactions were different. "Su Li, are we reckless this time? We don't even know the details of Ling Qinglan, but we give Wu Yun to him. If Ling Qinglan has a relationship with the Lianshi cult, won't it be bad?" Chu Qingning looked worried, but his doubts were also the most concerned. Ordinary people couldn't enter Yunjing, and they didn't have any informants. How could they know the origin of Ling Qinglan? However, Fang Yuan thought that Su Li was likely to know Ling Qinglan, just like knowing Ling Li and Ling Mo. After all, you were all surnamed Ling Qinglan is indeed his man. There is no doubt. Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan as if she had seen through his mind. She said lightly. Fang Yuan's eyes twitched, but Chu Qingning and others were still confused and didn't respond. However, when Chu Qingning saw Fang Yuan's unhappy face, he suddenly reacted and laughed. "What's wrong?" "I see. Ling Qinglan is the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. If he wants to enter that place, he must have a clean background. It's really amazing that he can arrange people in there." Yin Xuetong and others were confused, but Chu Qingning didn't explain who he was. It was okay to talk about Ling Li's identity in private. If he said it like this, it was hard to guarantee that someone would hear. He and Fang Yuan still had this self-awareness. Talk less about him in the future. Don't worry about the matter of the Lianshi cult. Try to stay away from it. Su Li looked indifferent. She turned around and left without any hesitation. Chu Qingning was speechless. No one knew what he was sighing about. Fang Yuan's face softened a lot, and there was a very faint smile on his face. For 3 days in a row, Su Li didn't go to the Lin Li building again. Instead, she stayed quietly in the courtyard of the school and enjoyed the meticulous care of her eldest brother, Su Qingtan. 3 days later, a large number of troops suddenly emerged in the Qinghe town and surrounded the Jin and Lin families. Jin Zhentian and Lin Xingrong were overjoyed. They thought that Yan Shixuan was forced to rebel, and they were about to use their private army. But when they saw that the leader of the army was not Yan Shixuan, but a young man in the black official uniform of the Supreme Court, their eyes widened, their hands and feet became cold, and they lost the power to resist. When did the people of the Supreme Judiciary arrive? They didn't receive any news. Seeing that the masters and lineal descendants of the two families were taken away, Yan Shixuan was instantly relaxed. The struggle that lasted for half a year finally came to an end. Looking at Ling Qinglan in front of him, who was in a black official uniform and looked serious, Yan Shixuan couldn't help but sigh. He tried his best but couldn't find any trace of Wu Yun. But Ling Qinglan just came to the Qinghe town for 2 days, and he caught Wu Yun from somewhere. His efficiency in solving the case was amazing. Ling Qinglan didn't know what method he used, but Wu Yun actually confessed what she had done. Even her relationship with the Jin and Lin families was clearly explained. Now the Jin and Lin families were completely unable to turn over the situation. They conspired to steal the official silver and colluded with the forces of the martial arts circle. The masters of the two families were bound to be beheaded, and the lineal descendants of the two families were also exiled. Lin Yanxing and Jin Ruolin, who had a promising future, were completely reduced to stray dogs. Lin Xiang, who had just become Lin Yanxing's concubine, was even more dumbfounded. She was almost completely overwhelmed by regret and bitterness. She worked hard to get close to Lin Yanxing, but she ended up being exiled. If she behaved herself and was a miss at home, how could today's disaster happen? After this incident, Su Huanli was finally released. Although no one bullied him in prison, he was so scared that he lost a lot of weight. He was dispirited and listless. However, when he saw Su Qingtan in a black official uniform, he recovered quickly. He suddenly knew that the son of a high-ranking official in the capital city was more useful than any elixir. Su Qingtan, who knew what happened at home, didn't have a good face to Su Huanli. He just said a few words of concern and said nothing more. He said that he would go home to see his mother when he was free. He didn't even mention the names of Zhu Yan and Mam. Su Huanli only thought that his son wanted to maintain his official prestige, so he agreed happily. He didn't realize that it was because of Su Li. After the Su family got rid of the suspicion, Su Qingtan thought that he could participate in the case soon. But Ling Qinglan didn't show up after waiting for a long time. He was confused and waited for 2 more days. Finally, he couldn't help but go to the Yan mansion. The satrap's mansion had specially set up a courtyard for Ling Qinglan to handle cases. Ling Qinglan's henchmen from Yunjing came in and out of the courtyard. Su Qingtan took a deep breath. It was also Ling Qinglan's henchmen. On the surface, everyone knew that Ling Qinglan and the third prince were very close. But only his henchmen knew that Ling Qinglan seemed to be loyal to another mysterious force. But he was a newcomer, so he couldn't know more. In the National Academy where everyone had a backer, Su Qingtan was almost born in a poor family. Since ancient times, there was no noble son in a poor family, and he was no exception. Moreover, only after entering the National Academy, he knew that almost everyone who could be called the top talent in the National Academy was a martial arts genius. The Dahan country didn't have equal civil and military officials as the book said, but paid more attention to martial arts cultivation. As for him, in the National Academy, he could only be regarded as having a few skills. If Ling Qinglan didn't appreciate his character and accepted him in advance, he wouldn't have left the National Academy in advance and become the officer of the Supreme Judiciary with a bright future. At most, he would go back to the Qinghe town and be a useless low-ranking official. Chapter 137. Su Qingtan was nervous and slightly bowed his head. Do you want to ask why I don't take you to deal with the case when your Su family has been excluded? Did your performance disappoint me? Ling Qinglan smiled and glanced at Su Qingtan, who was speechless. He got up, picked up a file on the table and threw it to Su Qingtan. Look at this. Su Qingtan opened the file and glanced at it. His face immediately became gloomy. He finally knew why Ling Qinglan didn't find him. Because the Su family was still involved in the case. Su Huanli and his family came to the Qinghe town and secretly took orders from Wu Yun. The method of finding the official silver in the Baiwei building was ordered by Wu Yun. The person who did it was Su Huanli's first madam, who is also your first madam, Zhu Yan. Su Qingtan, your Su family has a lot to do with Wu Yun. How can I let you participate in the case? Ling Qinglan gently patted Su Qingtan's stiff shoulder and said with a smile, only you and I know the content of the file. Wu Yun is treacherous and cunning. It is inevitable that your family was instigated to make some mistakes. But the mistakes can be big or small. Su Qingtan, I leave the matter of your Su family to you. How about that? Su Qingtan's heart sank. After thinking for a moment, he clasped his hands and said respectfully, yes, sir. Ling Qinglan waved his hand indifferently and said, you can leave now. Do it as soon as possible. There are many cases in the capital city. There is no time to delay here. Su Qingtan nodded and left. He held the file in his hand, but it was very heavy as if he was holding a mountain. After he left, Ling Qinglan came to his sense and his eyes flashed with interest. Uncle Shan, what do you think he will choose? The middle-aged guard shook his head. He didn't know Su Qingtan. How could he know what he would do? Ling Qinglan patted his fan and sat down again. He said, I like Su Qingtan because he is righteous but not loyal. I can take this opportunity to test whether he is worthy to be trained as my successor. As for whether he was the successor of the Supreme Judiciary or Inma cult, no one knew. The middle-aged guard's expression changed slightly. Before he said anything, Ling Qinglan waved his hand and said casually, I know what you mean, but it's a pity. God doesn't give me face. I don't live as long as them. I've always liked to plan before I act, so it's better to prepare early for some things. Looking at Ling Qinglan's indifferent expression, the middle-aged guard felt sad. However, when Su Qingtan returned to his residence and looked at the files on the table, his eyes were full of struggle. Whether it was Su Zipei or Zhu Yan, he didn't have any burden to catch them. Their affection in the past had long been exhausted because they hurt Su Li again and again. If it weren't for the family relationship, he would even regard them as enemies. If his father and grandmother asked about it, this document would be enough. It was Su Li who really made him feel pressure. This girl was repeatedly abused by Zhu Yan and bullied by Su Zipei, but she never complained. In her heart, she still regarded the two dregs as her relatives. He also understood that just like his feelings for Li Yuelyan, Zhu Yan was Su Li's biological mother. Blood was thicker than water, so it was impossible to erase it. If he caught Zhu Yan, would Su Li hate him for it? Su Qingtan's knuckles turned white, and blue veins appeared on his forehead because of excessive force. He was not afraid of anything. In Yunjing, he was in danger again, and he even bravely faced death. But now, he was very afraid, in the courtyard of the school. Su Li looked at the clean bluestone road outside. It seemed that the eldest brother would not come today. She opened the drawer, took out the AO sword skills from the secret compartment, and felt it carefully. Anyway, she had some achievements in the realm of swordsmanship in her previous life. She understood the first 3 hurdles of the AO sword skills without any difficulty. She even had a lot of insights, which loosened the bottleneck of Su Li's swordsmanship. But since she saw the 4th hurdle, Su Li seemed to become an idiot and couldn't understand a word. She clearly knew the words on the sword book, but she couldn't understand the meaning when they were put together. Su Li didn't think that it was her problem. Although she was not smart, she was not so stupid that she couldn't understand the book. There must be a mystery in the 4th hurdle of the AO sword skills, but she hadn't figured it out yet. In the previous life, Sword Lord Ho's practice was smooth, and he didn't have any bottleneck in swordsmanship. Why is it different for me? Su Li frowned secretly and felt a little annoyed. Although she was entangled with mundane affairs, she certainly understood that cultivation was the foundation. Except for the days when she dealt with special events, she didn't slack off for a day. She also used ordinary medicinal materials in the pharmacy to make a lot of mediocre auxiliary medicines to assist her practice. In just half a year, her cultivation had reached the peak of the inborn 3rd hurdle from the beginning of the inborn realm. She almost reached 1 realm in a month. Even Ling Li, who had reincarnated, couldn't compare with her cultivation speed, let alone other people in the martial arts circle. However, Su Li didn't mean to be complacent. She knew that there was always someone better than her. She even felt that her cultivation speed was slow and couldn't keep up with her plan. When the Linli building entered Yunjing, the inborn realm wouldn't be able to control it. So, she needed to step into a higher realm in a very short time. The framework of the Linli building is set up. It's time to order people to collect the news of the standard grade elixirs. Su Li's eyes flashed, and then she calmed down and immersed herself in the swordsmanship book again. This day was extremely quiet. Su Qingtan didn't pluck up the courage to come. In the next 2 days, there was no movement. Even Ling Qinglan, who had some confidence in him, gradually lost his smile. Could it be that this kid really burned the scroll? Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan finally received a servant's reply. Lord Su took people to a small inn. Clap. Ling Qinglan clapped his folding fan and smiled faintly. Don't disturb him. I'll go and have a look. At the same time, Su Li also received a message from Fang Yuan. She immediately figured out why Su Qingtan disappeared in the past 2 days. After thinking for a moment, she immediately dressed as Mr. Li and rushed to Zhu Yan's residence. Zhu Yan still lived in the small inn that Su Li chose. Even if she got the news that the Jin family and the Lin family fell, she didn't want to slip away. Because she knew that she and Su Zipei couldn't escape at all. Su Zipei ate the lunch served by the waiter in a low voice. After the people of the Jin family and the Lin family were arrested, she was shocked and wanted to escape. But her mother didn't leave, so she didn't dare to run around. Without her mother around, it was even a problem for her to go back to the Desa town. Fortunately, there were no soldiers in the past 2 days, which calmed Su Zipei's uneasiness a little. Mother, don't you come over to eat? After eating, Su Zipei turned back and said to the inner room. There was no response. She cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks and was about to take them downstairs. Suddenly, she felt the floor was shaking like an earthquake. Before she responded, the door was pushed open. A large number of soldiers rushed in and surrounded them. The innkeeper was still wailing, "Officer, it has nothing to do with me. I really didn't know that they were fugitives. Otherwise, how could I let them stay in the inn?" Su Zipei's face was as pale as paper. She was stiff all over. It seemed that even her eyes were frozen and couldn't move. The soldiers really came. "It's none of your business here. Go down." The innkeeper was so scared that he went downstairs as if he had been pardoned. Su Zipei heard such a familiar voice and immediately turned her eyes. She saw the teenager who was obviously different from the officers and soldiers. She was immediately overjoyed. "Eldest brother." "Mother, come out quickly. It's the eldest brother. The eldest brother is an officer. We are fine." Zhu Yan, who was full of despair in the inner room, suddenly heard these words. She ran out regardless of her messy hair. When she saw Su Qingtan in black with a serious face, she suddenly cried out, "Qing, it's really you." Then, Zhu Yan directly rushed to Su Qingtan and hugged his waist tightly. She cried and said, "I'm confused. This time, I'm really wrong. Qingtan, you are successful now. You can definitely save me, right?" Su Zipei believed that Su Qingtan came to let them go this time. She pretended to stand behind her mother and said timidly, "Eldest brother, you didn't tell me and my mother that you came back. My mother and I have been worried about you these days." The confidants who came with Su Qingtan were also uncertain at this moment. If the two people in front of them were really the relatives of Lord Su, why did Lord Su come here to shield them? He has just become the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. How dare he do this? It's nothing. I've seen it many times. In the entire Supreme Judiciary, only Lord Ling is very clean and fair. Lord Ling values him so much, but he dares to act recklessly. What a pity! Several young people whose cultivation exceeded the acquired 8th hurdle transmitted the sound to each other. They looked at Su Qingtan with contempt. At the same time, on the roof of the second floor of the restaurant diagonally opposite the inn, Ling Qinglan and Su Li stood opposite each other. The middle-aged guard was vigilant and looked at Su Li with horror. Before they came up, they didn't notice that there were people here. Ling Qinglan was slightly surprised and then said with a smile, "Ms. Li, you are really well informed. So many elite soldiers of the Supreme Judiciary with extraordinary cultivation walk on the street. It's hard not to attract attention." Su Li seemed to explain. Then she pointed to the direction of the inn and handed out a pot of Liehua spirits. She said with a smile, "The play in front of us is a good one. It's wonderful to be accompanied by this thing." Ling Qinglan was stunned at first. Then he took it and smelled it. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "Ms. Li, you are really a sentimental person." The two people quieted down. The situation in the inn changed again. Su Qingtan's face was calm. Seeing the mother and the son acting, he didn't feel the slightest fluctuation in his heart. He even felt a little disgusted. He waved his hand, which was the gesture of capturing someone in the Supreme Judiciary. Several confidants who were transmitting the sound behind him immediately flashed different lights in their eyes. Then they instantly moved, pulled Zhu Yan away from Su Qingtan's waist, and pressed her firmly on the ground. Zhu Yan screamed. The person behind her was so strong that she almost thought that her arm was broken. "How dare you? I am the aunt of your lord. How dare you treat me like this?" Chapter 138. Su Qingtan asked someone to hold Su Zipei's hands, and then he took the file. In the surprised eyes of the elite soldiers behind him, he said loudly, "The wife of the Su family, Madame Zhu, and the third daughter, Su Zipei. In the case of the theft of official silver, she helped Wu Yun, the culprit, to hide official silver in the Baiwei building, which caused Su Huanli to be imprisoned. After Wu Yun was brought to justice, she didn't repent and turned herself in. According to the law of the Dahan country, she should be arrested immediately." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhu Yan immediately screamed, "Su Qing, you can't do this to me. I'm your first mother. Do you want Su Li to have no mother?" And your fifth sister, she was just born. Do you have the heart to do that? Su Qingtan looked colder and didn't waver. How dare you mention the fifth sister? After you gave birth to her, you treated her as garbage and let the second sister take care of her. I have lived for more than 10 years, but I have never seen a mother more vicious than the first mother. Eldest brother. Su Zipei struggled desperately on the ground and begged, I'm really wrong. For the sake that I just listened to my mother, please spare my life. I'm sorry for the second sister, but you can't take revenge to death. Su Zipei immediately misunderstood Su Qingtan's cold-blooded appearance. She thought that he took revenge on them because of Su Li. Seeing that Su Zipei was pressed to the ground and half of her face was stained with black mud, Su Qingtan didn't want to explain, but he didn't want Su Li to be disputed because of this. He immediately looked a little relaxed and said lightly, the Supreme Judiciary will deal with your crime impartially. You can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. As soon as Zhu Yan heard that she didn't have to die, she stopped trembling. Since she didn't have to die, what was she afraid of? As long as Su Zipei worked hard, she would still have hope. Thinking of this, Zhu Yan immediately pretended to be bitter and said sadly, Qing, your first mother is wrong and admits all the crimes. But your third sister is innocent. She didn't know who those people were. I asked her to lead the way. You can put her crime on me. Mother. Su Zipei's whole body trembled, and her expression changed. She had selfishly wanted to get away from the crime alone, but her mother took the blame on herself. Su Qingtan snorted and said, the Supreme Judiciary will decide whether he is guilty or not. Take him away. Ling Qinglan's henchmen looked at Su Qingtan with appreciation, and then they left with Su Qingtan and Ling Qinglan. People who liked to watch the fun had already gathered around. When they saw a large group of officers and soldiers coming out, they immediately pushed away to make a way for them. Who is that? He doesn't seem to be from Qinghe City. I don't know. Maybe he's a fugitive. Hearing the discussion, Su Zipei lowered her head. Her hair covered her blushing face. Her hands, which were cut behind her back, were clenched so tightly that they turned white. This moment was the most humiliating moment in her life, second to none. Even when he failed to make beggar's chicken in the Byway building, he was not as embarrassed as he was today. The only thing worth rejoicing was that they came from the Desa town, and people in the Qinghe town didn't know them. If their identities were recognized, it would be worse than death. Su Li watched the officers and soldiers leave. Then she looked at Ling Qinglan on the roof of the restaurant, who seemed to let down his guard and drank from time to time. She asked with a smile, Child Ling, how many points do you think Su Qingtan can get? She naturally knew that Ling Qinglan was deliberately testing Su Qingtan. Otherwise, there was no need to take so much trouble to bring people to observe secretly. Ling Qinglan smiled and said affirmatively, 5 points. The full score is 10. Originally, he could get 7 or 8 points. Unfortunately, the sentence, he can be exempted from the death penalty, made him lose 3 points. What a pity. Such a low score. It seems that you don't like him. How about giving him to the Lin Li building? Su Li's eyes were bright, and her tone was serious. Ling Qinglan was stunned at first, and then he smiled and said, Mr. Li, don't worry. I just said half of my words. Although the full score is 10, I appreciate 5 points. If he can be really cold-hearted, I really don't dare to use him. I see. Su Li said indifferently, a gentleman doesn't snatch what others like. Although I am not a woman, I can't compete with you. But, do you really know the weakness of Child Su? Of course, his weakness is not the Su family. Ling Qinglan's expression was as if the question was too simple. He said, Su Qingtan is young after all. He exposed his weakness from the beginning. If he can go to the courtyard of the school less, I may give him the best 6 points. Su Li squinted her eyes and said, Child Qing, you deserve to be the think tank of a sect. But you have taken my wine. Aren't you afraid that I will poison it? The middle-aged guard's eyes were cold, and he was instantly in a state of hostility. Ling Qinglan's right hand trembled slightly, and then he quickly calmed down. He shook the flagon in his hand and looked relaxed. He said, I believe that the person who can make such a good wine is certainly reluctant to poison it. Am I right? That's not necessarily true. Su Li jumped out of the restaurant and turned into a wisp of smoke and went away from the top of the building. She said, "A flagon of wine costs 100,000 taels. Child, remember to pay the bill." Ling Qinglan was stunned again, and then he laughed more happily. But he didn't know when his back was completely soaked. It was the 15th of May. It was not a special day, but it was the day when the families of the officials of the Jin family and the Lin family were exiled. Early in the morning, the gate of the prison was crowded with people who came to watch the fun. If there were no officers and soldiers to maintain the order, it would have been crowded. As a victim of the case, Su Li was naturally invited by Yan Shixuan to watch from the attic with the best view. When she came over, there were 5 or 6 people in the attic. Ling Qinglan stood in the front, and then Yan Shixuan. "Workshop owner Su, I haven't seen you for a long time. How are you?" Seeing Su Li coming, Yan Shixuan hurriedly greeted her. The Yan family would dominate the Qinghe town in the future. Now he was in high spirits because of the happy event. His whole spirit was different. "Thank you for your concern, Lord Yan. I have been accompanied by you these days. My injury is not a problem now." Su Li smiled and shook her left hand. But Su Qingtan stepped over and stopped her. He blamed her. "Your injury still needs to be nursed. Don't move. The weather is getting hot. Remember to ask Mammy Li to change the gauze frequently." "Got it, eldest brother." Su Li stuck out her tongue. Yan Shixuan smiled happily. Finally, there was a Su family who regarded Su Li as a treasure. Otherwise, this girl's life would be too bitter. Seeing Su Li coming, Ling Qinglan nodded with a faint smile. He didn't care about Su Li for the time being. If it weren't for Su Qingtan, he wouldn't even pay attention to her. Boom, at this time, the gate of the prison was finally slowly pushed open by the officers and soldiers. A large group of prisoners in dirty white prison uniforms with handcuffs and fetters were driven out by a group of jailers. All of them had disheveled hair and looked frightened. Some of them didn't do anything wrong. But since they were born in the Jin family and the Lin family, they couldn't escape this disaster. The masters of the Jin family and the Lin family made a wrong decision. The people of the Jin family looked at the bright sun and sighed. Even if the first master could come back, they couldn't see him in this life. They only hoped that the first master could come back to avenge them. Nothing else mattered. Madame Lin didn't have time to care about her own safety. She held her son at this moment and said with red eyes, "Son, it's all my and your father's fault." It seemed that Lin Yanxing didn't hear his mother's words. His shoulders were covered with blood and the chains rattled. Cultivators who were exiled had to suffer the punishment of bone piercing. The 2 chains had just been planted and dragged on the ground. Every step he took, Lin Yanxing trembled with pain and felt that he was better off dead than alive. His eyes were red. He looked at the people around him who were pointing at him and smiled bitterly. Who could imagine that he, who held a small banquet in the Qinghe school and enjoyed great fame, became a useless person who was exiled today? Suddenly he saw a tall tower. He stared at the few people who looked like gods under the illumination of the tower. "Yan Shixuan, just you wait. I will pay you back 100 times for the shame you brought me today." Ling Qinglan touched his chin with interest. The teenager's eyes were interesting. Unfortunately, he was not smart. He showed hatred at this time. He glanced at Yan Shixuan secretly. As expected, he saw the killing intent flashed in Yan Shixuan's eyes. He was really reckless. Su Qingtan shook his head. If he were Lin Yanxing, he would keep a low profile at this moment and wait patiently for the soldiers to lose their vigilance. Then he would escape. Of course, he would not end up as miserable as Lin Yanxing. The road was very long. The Jin family and the Lin family passed through the streets of the Qinghe town like a parade and then went out of the city gate. Some people who threw rotten eggs, leftovers, and even stones stopped and dispersed. When the parade passed through the gate of the Linli building, Luo Yichen saw it. Looking at Lin Yanxing, who seemed to be crazy every step of the prisoners, Luo Yichen was tense and breathed slightly. He seemed to see himself in those years. Mei Ruhen grasped Luo Yichen's hands tightly and looked worried. Luo Yichen felt the warmth from the former and finally relaxed. Then his gentle eyes fell directly on the former's face. Fortunately, the 5 years of hellish days had passed, and the heavens compensated him with a fairy, so it wasn't a loss. Su Li didn't look at Lin Yanxing, but looked at Lin Xiang, who mixed in the parade. The package of aphrodisiac was still in the underground addendum of the Linli building. After analysis, she also figured out the origin of the aphrodisiac. It was related to a sect in the martial arts circle. Since it was a cooked duck, she couldn't let it fly. The exiled prisoners left. Only the masters of the Jin family and the Lin family were left in the death cell. They would be beheaded later. Ling Qinglan took people back to Yunjing, but let Su Qingtan stay to deal with the affairs of the Su family. He also left a small number of people to Su Qingtan. The Supreme Judiciary was one of the most violent institutions in the Dahan country. Every officer of the Supreme Judiciary had the same status as any official of the Imperial Court in the 4th grade. Su Qingtan had this status, so he naturally had the qualification to settle down in Yunjing. Ling Qinglan once asked Su Qingtan to make a choice. In order to take care of Su Li, Su Qingtan finally chose to move his family to Yunjing. Su Huanli and others were naturally overjoyed when they heard the news. It was a great thing that they moved from the remote Desu town to a family in Yunjing. Su Huanli didn't have time to visit Zhu Yan and Su Zipei, who were still imprisoned in the prison. He directly took a carriage to go back to the Baiwei building in the Desu town. Even the newly opened Baiwei building in the Qinghe town also put up a sign of selling land. Everything would start from the beginning when he went to Yunjing. Because Zhu Yan was directly involved in the official silver, she couldn't escape the responsibility. Ling Qinglan gave the disposal power to Yan Shixuan. For the sake of Su Li and Su Qingtan, Yan Shixuan chose the lightest punishment, which was 20 strokes of the stick. Su Zipei's punishment was lighter. She only needed to be beaten 10 strokes of the stick. Even so, Zhu Yan's buttocks were beaten badly. She could only lie on the bed and couldn't get out of bed for half a year. Su Zipei also lay on the bed like her mother. But her injury would be completely healed in half a month. Looking at Su Li, who was taking care of her mother and her, Su Zipei turned her head. Her eyes were full of resentment. Chapter 139. Su Li took care of Zhu Yan for half a month. Every day, Zhu Yan looked at her as if she was an enemy without any complaint. Su Qingtan couldn't stand it. When Su Zipei's injury was almost healed, he immediately asked Su Zipei to take over Su Li's position and let Su Li go back to the school to have a good rest. I didn't eat the food you served. I'd better go back and have a rest. Su Qingtan looked at Su Li, who was pale because of lack of rest these days. He couldn't help but feel distressed. He hated Zhu Yan and Su Zipei more. If he didn't have to take care of Su Li with the excuse of moving the whole family, how could he let Zhu Yan go to the capital with him? Eldest brother, I'm fine. Don't blame me. I'm going back. Su Li forced a smile and turned away. After she disappeared in the gatehouse, Su Qingtan snorted and said to Su Zipei, who was back to him, "Don't think that I don't know what you and your daughter have done in the past 6 months. If Su Li didn't care about the old affection, I wouldn't care about family affection at all. You take care of yourselves." Hearing the footsteps behind her leaving, Su Zipei's body was slightly stiff. Her nails pinched the wet cloth in her hand and her face showed a ferocious and unreconciled expression. "Eldest brother, I am the daughter of the Su family. Su Li is just a bastard. Why do you spoil her but don't even look at me?" She took a wet cloth to wipe Zhu Yan's forehead. Her lips trembled and she whispered, "Mother, V doesn't belong to the Su family anymore." Su Li didn't go back to the school. Instead, she went to the mansion of the Jin family, today's Li Mansion. After overthrowing the Jin family and the Lin family, Yan Shixuan kept his promise. He not only transferred all the land deeds of the Jin family to the Linli building, but also returned double the silver. The savings of the Linli building suddenly expanded unprecedentedly. The future income was not only from selling wine, but also from the rent of several streets. Of course, compared with these, Yan Shixuan got much more benefits. He knew that he could make a fortune in silence, so he didn't make it public and didn't act recklessly. In the Qinghe town without the Jin family and the Lin family, the distribution of forces seemed to be clear. On the surface, Yan Shishuan's family was the most powerful one, but only he knew that the Yan family and the Linli building were equally matched. Even the Yan family had to rely on the Linli building for many things. Yan Shishuan had always politely declined and feared the forces of the martial arts circle. But the appearance of the Linli building broke his rules. On the surface, it was just a winery. It didn't seem to violate the rules that the forces of the martial arts circle entered the secular world. The owner of the Linli building was also very kind. He was not as cruel and merciless as people in the martial arts circle who regarded people as non-entities. It could be said that the latter reason was the reason why Yan Shishuan didn't reject the Linli building. If the Linli building was the same as the force he used to be, he would have reported the existence of the Linli building to the imperial court and tried his best to eradicate it. Su Li, everything is packed. We can set off at any time. Yin Xuetong came in from outside and looked worried. She said, "But Yunjing is under the rule of the emperor. Ordinary people can't go there. What's more, Chu Qingning scratched his head and looked at Su Li. With their identities, it would be a great thing if they were not arrested, not to mention entering Yunjing. How could they sneak into the city to open a winery?" Su Li glanced at him and didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "How about your discussion? How many of you stay and how many of you go with me?" The forces of the Qinghe town had been stabilized. This was the base camp of the Linli building. Su Li must leave most of the people to develop the foundation and only take a few people to Yunjing. As for the candidates to go to Yunjing, she let Fang Yuan and others discuss it by themselves. As soon as she finished speaking, Fang Yuan stood up and said, "I will go with you. Shaoling and Xiaomu will stay to help." "I will stay too." Luo Yichen stood up and stared at Su Li's calm face. He said, "Unless Ruhan also goes." He knew that Su Li hadn't told Mei Ruhan her true identity, and the Mei family wouldn't allow Mei Ruhan to go to Yunjing with a group of unknown people. In this way, he could only stay. Su Li nodded slightly, and coldness flashed in her eyes. She said in a cold voice, "Luo Yichen, I don't restrict your freedom, but it doesn't mean that you can disobey my orders. You have to remember that you are working for the Linli building. Even if I want you to die, you have to do it obediently. Do you know that?" Luo Yichen held his breath, and anger flashed in his eyes. But when he thought that Mei Ruhan was still here, he had to lower his voice and nod to show that he understood. "It's good that you understand. The safety of the Linli building in the Qinghe town is entrusted to you. You and Fang Mu are responsible for the training of new members in the secluded site. If there is any mistake, I will hold you responsible." Luo Yichen was stunned. He thought that Su Li said so to let him go to Yunjing with her. He didn't expect that it was just a simple warning. Moreover, she was bold enough to directly hand over the Linli building in the Qinghe town to him. Wasn't she afraid that he would destroy the foundation of the Linli building? "What? Are you not satisfied with me?" Su Li raised her eyebrows and said in a teasing tone. Luo Yichen's face darkened. He knew that Su Li's words were not even a warning, but an extremely sinister prank. "Although I don't trust you, I believe that you care about Mei Ruhan." Su Li pointed at the position of Luo Yichen's heart and said in a feminine tone, "Even if it is the future of you and Mei Ruhan, you have to perform well. Otherwise, your Luo family will not allow you to marry a common woman." Luo Yichen's heart shrank fiercely, and his expression changed slightly. What did she know? There were thousands of Luo families in the Zhu Shou country. How did she know which Luo family he came from? Just thinking about it, Luo Yichen suddenly felt that his chest was patted gently. Immediately, there was a thin piece of paper in his hand, which was written AO sword skills. "Even if you are over the age, you should at least be a young master. Don't let me down," Su Li said. Then she waved to Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning and Yin Xuetong and left the attic first. Chu Qingning clicked his tongue and patted Luo Yichen, who was still in a daze. He said, "Since Su Li can give this to you, at least she completely trusts you for the time being." You have to perform well and break through the inborn realm as soon as possible. Yin Xuetong covered her mouth and chuckled. Then she followed Chu Qingning to leave. Fang Yuan walked at the end and unexpectedly stopped. He said quite seriously, the Qinghe town needs a master of the inborn realm. The foundation of the Linli building should be guarded well. When everyone left, Luo Yichen looked at Fang Yuan's back and then lowered his head to look at Ao's sword skills. Finally, he couldn't help but swallow hard. The swordsmanship classic can help break through the inborn realm. Su Li should have this kind of thing. Even the Luo family didn't have this kind of thing, which was comparable to the sacred canon. But Su Li just helped him a little bit and he got it. At this moment, Luo Yichen's inner thoughts suddenly showed signs of changing. When Fang Yuan and the other two people followed Su Li to the underground addendum, they were all confused. They didn't know what Su Li would say. Su Li turned her hand and took out a wooden token. She put it in Fang Yuan's hand and said in a low voice, "Use this to enter Yunjing under the cover of the Tianya house. It is not a big problem." This token was left to Su Li by Ling Li at that time. Fang Yuan's expression changed slightly. Even if he was very reluctant, he could only nod because it was Su Li's order. I didn't expect that Su Qingtan would come back in advance. My original plan was to let you sneak into Yunjing as servants of the Su family. Unfortunately, it is too late. Su Li sighed softly and took a pink package from the table and put it in front of everyone. In addition to entering Yunjing, there is one more thing to finish. In the Linli building, Yin Xuetong's intelligence was second only to Su Li's. She immediately recognized that this was the aphrodisiac that Luo Yichen bought from the black market in the town, and it was made by Lin Xiang herself. Lin Xiang has been exiled now. Do we have to rescue her? Yin Xuetong didn't know the grievances between Lin Xiang and Su Li, so he couldn't help but ask. Su Li's eyes flashed and she said with a smile, "Rescue her? No, we have to nip her future in the cradle, or there will be trouble. If the elders in your family are well informed enough, they should know that there is a hidden sect in the martial arts circle in Nanjiang country, called the Hehuan sect." The three people heard it, but they were all at a loss. They had never heard of it. Seeing this scene, Su Li couldn't help but laugh. Even in the martial arts circle, the Hehuan sect was also a sect with a grade. Although it was the lowest grade 9, it was not known by ordinary forces. What's more, standing in front of her now was not the head of a family, but a lineal disciple. In short, you just need to know that the aphrodisiac in Lin Xiang's hands comes from the Hehuan sect. I don't know why the Hehuan sect will leak the formula. But once they know that there is such a girl in the secular world who can make it, what do you think they will do? Su Li asked. Chu Qingning immediately patted his thigh and said, "It turns out that Ru Chu, Lin Xiang will probably be accepted by the Hehuan sect. If she hates the Qinghe town, it will be a trouble in the future. You want us to kill Lin Xiang to avoid future troubles, am I right?" Su Li smiled and looked at Yin Xuet. Yin Xuetong frowned. Since Su Li asked, her intuition told her that the answer would not be so simple. "You do it for these obscene prescriptions?" Fang Yuan suddenly frowned and asked, "But if we get the prescriptions, where will we use them?" He didn't believe that Su Li would do business with obscene prescriptions. Not only him, but also Chu Qingning and others would not be able to stand it. Su Li sat down and poured herself a cup of tea. She looked a little lazy. "You are still too young." The three people heard it and raised their eyebrows. "You're obviously the youngest one in the room." Su Li glanced at the three people who were angry and explained with a smile, "The people of the Hehuan sect never believe outsiders. Even if they can investigate Lin Xiang's background, they will feel troublesome. If they find Lin Xiang, they will only kill her to avoid future troubles. What the three of you have to do is to ask the whereabouts of the formula before they find Lin Xiang." Su Li really did it for the formula, which made Fang Yuan's heart sink. "I don't get the formula for business. Although the business of aphrodisiac has always been profitable." Su Li shook the teacup, and a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. She said, "I just want to let those bitches of the Hehuan sect have a taste of being framed. Do they feel good or not?" The three people were relieved, And then they couldn't help but wonder how Su Li had contact with the Hahuan sect. There were even grievances. She had never been out of the Dahan country. Chapter 140. In the courtyard of the school, Mammy Li was busy packing. Almost all of Su Li's personal property was here. She was driven out by Mam Su Chui very early, so the Su family in the Desa town had nothing. Second sister, have you finished packing? We will set off in 2 days. Su Qingtan's gentle and clear voice came from outside the courtyard. Su Li looked up and saw Su Qingtan was tall and dressed in a light and elegant brocade robe. His long black hair reached his back and there was only a wooden hairpin in his hair bun. When he bent over and passed through the courtyard gate, his long hair immediately slipped to his chest. Seeing Su Li holding a scroll on the second floor, Su Qingtan smiled and showed a row of white and neat teeth. Only in front of the second sister could he show such a bright smile without scruples. It was impossible for others, even for his mother. Second brother. Su Li bounced downstairs, and the breeze blew her long hair behind her back. She had the unique intelligence and gentleness of a young girl, which melted Su Qingtan's heart. After suffering, his second sister could still maintain such a pure mind. It was really the most precious treasure in his life to have such a younger sister. Mammy Li is busy. Su Li looked at her eldest brother who was half a head taller than her. She was very calm. Her innocence had long disappeared with all the things in her previous life. She always kept vigilance in the face of the Su family, Qi Xianqing, Wen Ruomin, Yan Shishuan and other people who were kind to her. The vigilance had been engraved in her bones. But in front of the eldest brother, she was absolutely not pretending. She was really at ease and happy from the heart. Although the eldest brother had a relationship with the Inma cult, in this life, the eldest brother could become famous at a young age and get the official position of the 4th grade. It was really great that he could live up to his talent. Well, you have a lot of time after you go to Yunjing. Can you spare some time for me? Suddenly, a familiar and strange voice came from the door. Su Li was slightly shocked. She knew the identity of the person, but she didn't expect that he came back at this time. Su Qingtan protected Su Li and suddenly looked back. He was stunned and said, "Dr. Qi? Why are you?" Although Qi Xianqing was not dirty and messy, he was absolutely not clean. With Su Li's eyesight, she could see at a glance that the old guy hadn't taken a bath for at least 2 months. Qi Xianqing came over and patted Su Qingtan's shoulder with appreciation. "You didn't let me down. Now that you've become a member of the Supreme Court, it's enough to protect your sister. But remember, don't be arrogant and complacent. There are even more muddy waters in the world, which Qinghe City cannot compare to." Su Qingtan's eyesight was much better than before. Now when he saw Qi Xianqing, he felt that he was back to the National Academy and faced the great scholar like the headmaster. Also, he felt that he was in the Yunjing horse farm and faced the powerful general. "Mr. Qi, what are you?" Su Qing'an wanted to ask, but Qi Xianqing waved his hand to stop him. He said, "I am just a villager. It is good that you want to take this girl to Yunjing. But your second sister is the most talented girl in the Qinghe town. She can't be neglected." Qi Xianqing said. "Sir, Su Qingtan was helpless. He also knew that. But there was no such thing as a win-win situation in the world. If he had a way to let Su Li enter the National Academy in Yunjing, he would have arranged it. Unfortunately, what was the National Academy? He didn't have that kind of power. Of course, I know that you can't do it. I will arrange it. You can leave first. I will talk with this girl alone." Qi Xianqing angrily drove Su Qingtan out of the yard. If he didn't come back late this time, there would be a lot of trouble. There were too many spies in Yunjing. He didn't want to expose his whereabouts so early. Bang! Su Qingtan went out of the yard in a hurry. Before he turned around and said a word, the door was closed with a bang. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. After closing the door, Qi Xianqing looked at Su Li who was standing in the yard with a happy face. He was instantly angry and said, "You are so reckless. Why don't you think about your life? Tell me, how many times did you almost die when I was away? I didn't teach you to practice martial arts for fun." Looking at Qi Xianqing's angry face, Su Li held back the impulse to laugh. She lowered her head and said with grievance, "But I can't beat them." Qi Xianqing patted his head. He was confused because of anger. Su Li couldn't beat Jin Qing Ao or the bastards of the Lianshi cult. "Let me see if you have slacked off in practice during this time." Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing waved his hand. Su Li's eyes flashed with slyness. Her feet flashed, and a pink fist came to Qi Xianqing in the blink of an eye. Bang! Touching his sore eyes, Qi Xianqing was a little confused. He was beaten by his apprentice because of carelessness? Was it because he was too tired to run around these days? Qi Xianqing thought of something and suddenly became excited. He grabbed Su Li's wrist. Su Li immediately felt a homologous genuine energy flowing into her tendons and vessels. But compared with the black genuine energy she cultivated, this genuine energy was not pure enough. Su Li knew that this was because Qi Xianqing only had half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. It turns out that this old guy has been stuck in the inborn peak. Unfortunately, it is too difficult to break through that level in the secular world. Thinking of this, Su Li slightly converged her pubic region and only revealed the cultivation of the acquired 8th hurdle. But even so, Qi Xianqing was still completely shocked. This girl, in just half a year, she jumped from the acquired 3rd hurdle to the acquired 8th hurdle. He remembered that when his master taught him to practice, he praised that he had reached the acquired 8th hurdle at the age of 18. It was a superior talent. Although he didn't have the appearance of a young master, it was enough to disdain warriors of the same age, which made his master feel inferior. But this girl was only 16 years old. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but tremble slightly. Could he cultivate a young master as his apprentice when he was old? Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing couldn't help but tremble with excitement. He immediately overturned the original road prepared for Su Li. The so-called natural law followed the natural law. Such a talented person should not be bound by him. Instead, she should develop freely according to her thoughts. He only needed to control the direction of Su Li's growth to ensure that she would not go astray. If Su Li couldn't break through the inborn hurdle because of his rules and regulations, then he would have no face to see his master in the afterlife. "My apprentice, how did you practice?" "I estimated that you could reach the acquired 5th hurdle at most. I never thought that you could reach 3 hurdles more. Did you eat something?" Qi Xianqing collected his thoughts and asked nervously. Although Su Li's foundation was stable, he didn't rule out that she had eaten some evil elixirs. He had to ask clearly. Su Li smiled slightly and said, "Master, come with me." Although the old guy was hypocritical in the previous life and even participated in the martial arts team against her, it was not his fault after all. His selfless contribution in this life was enough for her to pay back. She didn't like to owe others, and she didn't like others to owe her. Some accounts should be settled clearly in advance to avoid trouble later. Indifference flashed in Su Li's eyes. Unfortunately, Qi Xianqing followed her, and there was still a little excitement on his face. He didn't notice it at all. When they came to the room, Su Li asked Mammy Li to leave. Then she took out a piece of unknown dark yellow bast paper from the secret compartment. The surface of the bast paper was slightly ragged, but fortunately, the handwriting was still clear. Qi Xianqing knew at a glance that it was an old thing. Seeing Su Li handed over the scroll, Qi Xianqing was puzzled, but he still took it and spread it out. When his sight fell on the first line, his eyes suddenly became bigger than a copper bell. This was the second half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction that he had been looking for many years. It's really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, but finding it by chance without any effort. Qi Xianqing tightly grasped the scroll with both hands, and his old eyes were slightly moist. Only he knew how many generations they had worked hard for the second half of the Book of Poison. He thought that he would be buried with regret in this life. He never thought that Su Li suddenly gave him such a big surprise. "Girl, where did you get this thing?" Looking at Qi Xianqing's old tears, Su Li smiled slightly and whispered, "In the prisoner camp outside the Qinghe town. I felt the call of the unseen and dug it out from the soil." Prisoner camp, Qi Xianqing sighed with emotion. He didn't expect that the most important book of poison of his sect was hidden in the dirtiest place in the Qinghe town. No wonder he went everywhere, but he couldn't find any clue. That was, Su Li was destined to learn the second half of the book of poison. Otherwise, no one knew when the second half of the book of poison would appear. Su Li saw that Qi Xianqing's face kept changing. Sometimes he was happy, and sometimes he was sad. A glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. In her previous life, it was all thanks to those prostitutes who bullied and humiliated her that she had obtained the book of poison. If they had not pressed her head hard into the soil and almost suffocated her to death, she would not have noticed that the soil had a strange odor. She then dug it out of curiosity, and because of this digging, a terrifying demoness appeared in her previous life. Qi Xianqing had lived for several 60 years. He had extraordinary knowledge and high cultivation. After reading the second half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction several times, he had remembered the whole text. Then he carefully rolled the scroll, took out the piece of human skin, and gently put them in Su Li's hands. "Disciple, you are destined to learn this thing. I naturally can't take it for myself. I am already satisfied to have the honor to witness the completion of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. There are few people in the Ghost Valley. You are my last disciple. You will inherit the Ghost Valley meditation direction in the future. You should take good care of the Ghost Valley meditation direction and its secret method. Don't let it be lost." Su Li was slightly shocked. Although she knew that she was the last disciple of Qi Xianqing, she didn't expect that Qi Xianqing valued her so much. For a long time, she always regarded Qi Xianqing as a convenient shield. In her eyes, the relationship between them was more like a transaction. If you gave me the first half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction, I would give you the second half. If you gave me the secret method and the disguise skill, I would give you something else in the future. A teacher for a day is a father for a lifetime. Su Li lowered her head and rolled her eyes. There was a touch of sarcasm in her eyes. She didn't expect that Qi Xianqing still maintained such a traditional and simple idea in his heart after living in the martial arts circle for a lifetime. He really regarded her as his own daughter instead of controlling her as a tool to strengthen himself. Seeing that Su Li slowly took over the scroll in her hands, Qi Xianqing smiled knowingly and felt relieved. He came back in a hurry to see whether Su Li was well or not. Now he felt that this girl was so lucky that he didn't need to worry too much about her future. Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing touched Su Li's long black and smooth hair and said kindly, "Disciple, what do you want to do in Yunjing? You can tell me. Maybe I can help a little." Chapter 141. Qi Xianqing heard the words and laughed. He shook his finger and pointed at the tip of Su Li's nose. He said, "Disciple, it is not difficult for your master. Anyway, your master has been an official in the Dehan dynasty for a few years. I know the rules clearly. Let me think about it. I can study and practice at the same time." Without thinking for a long time, Qi Xianqing gave her 2 ways. He said, "The first way is that you enter the National Academy and become a student of the Girls' School of Martial Arts of the National Academy. Then you can naturally study and practice at the same time. Besides, there are many seniors in the National Academy. If you encounter difficulties in practice, you can also find help." Su Li immediately shook her head. She had too many secrets. How could she go to the National Academy in such an exposed way? If she was accidentally seen by others, she wouldn't know how she died. It is too ostentatious. I don't like it. Moreover, Master, didn't you say that unless it's necessary, we shouldn't enter the imperial court? If we enter the National Academy, I'm afraid that the day we come out, we'll be forced to join a faction. Qi Xianqing smiled happily when he saw his disciple smile. Su Li could see the situation so clearly. If she entered the officialdom, she would be a rare talent. If Su Li really agreed or hesitated, he would not be at ease to let her go to Yunjing with Su Qingtan. After testing her, he felt more at ease. "Since I don't like it, I have a second way." Qi Xianqing smiled like an old liar. He took out an exquisite jade token with a line of small seal characters on the surface and a blank back. Then he casually took out a dagger and slashed it at the back of the jade tablet. For a moment, jade chips flew everywhere. Su Li was inexplicable. She didn't recognize the origin of the jade token. Although she had been to Yunjing in the previous life, she couldn't get in touch with the things of the National Academy because of her identity. She didn't know the identity represented by the jade token. At this time, Qi Xianqing had stopped carving. He blew off the remaining jade chips on the back of the jade token and put it in Su Li's palm. Su Li looked at it and turned it over. She saw her name and a symbol that she didn't know the meaning engraved on the back. "Master, this..." Before Su Li spoke, Qi Xianqing raised his hand and interrupted. "You carry this jade pendant with you. It can ensure that you are unimpeded in the National Academy, and it won't be too ostentatious. The only thing you need to do is to go to the courtyards next to the National Academy every day. But you can also take the books there to read. It's not a waste of time." Later, Qi Xianqing muttered something, but the words were not clear enough. Su Li didn't hear it clearly. She put away the jade token and felt strange. She always felt that there was something that Qi Xianqing didn't tell her. But it didn't matter. As long as the first two sentences of Qi Xianqing were true, everything else didn't matter. After Qi Xianqing sent the jade token, he didn't stay here for a long time and left, saying that he was going to see an old friend. An old and kind figure flashed in front of Su Li. She couldn't help but shake her head. It was a blessing to see an old friend when she lived to the age of Qi Xianqing. After Qi Xianqing left, Su Qingtan, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came in and asked with concern, "What did Mr. Qi say to you?" Su Li didn't hide it. She took out the jade token and showed it to Su Qingtan. She hoped that he could speculate the identity of Qi Xianqing. When Su Qingtan saw the jade token, his expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but take it and look at it carefully. After a long time, he raised his head and gave it back to Su Li. He said, "It's strange. It's not like the jade token of the National Academy. I once had a jade token and also saw the jade tokens of the teachers of the National Academy. They are different from yours." Su Li's eyes flashed, but she smiled and put away the jade token. She said with a smile, "It's not the same. It will be clear when I go to Yunjing. The teacher won't hurt me." But seeing Su Li's bright smile, Su Qingtan looked solemn and sighed in his heart. "He won't hurt you. He is your benefactor." It was beyond Su Qingtan's imagination that the teacher could give a jade token and inscribe words on it. He only knew that even the best teacher of the National Academy didn't have the qualification. In another courtyard of the National Academy, a bamboo tea house was specially built. It was ventilated and cool. The plaque was engraved with, "A gentleman is like a bamboo." It was all green. "Summer is coming. My tea house is finally put to use again." Ha! Ning Yunji happily tasted the tea that Ning Qing made for him and gently hummed the opera. Ning Qing, who was reading aside, rolled her eyes frequently. "Su Li is about to go to Yunjing. Father, everything you have arranged is in vain. Aren't you disappointed at all?" Ning Qing couldn't help but ask after putting down the book. Ning Yunji smiled and was about to say something. Suddenly, there was an unusual wind in the tea house. Then he only felt that there was a flash in front of him. There was one more person on the opposite side of the tea table. "Who is it?" Seeing the old man who appeared like a ghost, Ning Qing got up in shock. She subconsciously wanted to pull out the dagger on her waist. But she heard Ning Yunji shout, "Stop!" She turned around and looked at her father. Her almond-shaped eyes were bigger than walnuts. Her father even knelt and kowtowed to the old man who looked younger than him. Ning Yunji was so excited at the moment that he couldn't control himself. He saluted respectfully and said, "Teacher Qi, I am Ning Yunji. Greetings to you." At the moment, Qi Xianqing didn't smile like an old liar. Instead, he looked solemn and serious. He really looked like a super mundane person. "Qing, come and greet Teacher Qi." Ning Yunji scolded severely. Although Ning Qing was very unwilling, she still knelt down reluctantly and called him Grandmaster Qi. But she thought in her heart that it was not inappropriate for her to kneel down to an old man who was 70 or 80 years old. "Xiaoning, it's rare that you still remember me. I didn't expect that your daughter has grown up so much. Qi Xianqing sighed and smiled kindly. Ning Yunji then relaxed and said half-jokingly, 60 years have passed. If I don't even marry a wife and have children, won't my life be in vain? Qi Xianqing heard it and immediately laughed. Ning Qing still doubted secretly. Was the old man who suddenly appeared as long-lived as her father said? She felt that Qi Xianqing was younger than her father. Qi Xianqing stopped whispering and took out a brocade box and put it on the table. He sighed and said, Ning Yunji, you and I are not destined. It's rare that you still care about the old friendship and save the life of my last disciple. This is a thank you gift. You have to accept it. Ning Yunji was terrified in his heart. But he remembered Qi Xianqing's teaching, so he took it with trembling hands. Ning Qing rolled her eyes. A gentleman can be deceived by his integrity. That was what her father meant. This thing can prolong your life for 10 years. There is no disease or pain. I refined it in a circle. Qi Xianqing squinted and said, remember not to show it to others. I'm afraid that you will be killed. Now take it quickly. Prolong life for 10 years? Is there such a magical thing in the world? Ning Yunji heard it with his eyes wide open. He immediately obeyed Qi Xianqing's instruction. He was going to open the brocade box and take the elixir. But before he opened the brocade box was taken away by Ning Qing. Father, how can there be elixir to prolong life in the world? It's nonsense. Can he bargain with the king of hell? He must be an old liar. Father, you are confused. Ning Qing looked angry. She offended Qi Xianqing. Ning Yunji trembled with anger. His face was pale. He waved his hand to slap her. Seeing that her father was going to slap her because of Qi Xianqing, Ning Qing was so scared that she shrank and closed her eyes. The pain she imagined didn't appear on her face. She opened her eyes with grievance. She saw that Qi Xianqing grabbed Ning Yunji's hand. He, you don't have to do this. Qi Xianqing let Ning Yunji sit down. He didn't look at Ning Qing. His tone was still calm. You were like this in the past. If you didn't see something, you would be contemptuous of me like your daughter for the rest of your life. Ning Yunji heard that and remembered some past events. He immediately bowed his head in shame. So, Qi Xianqing said that they were not fated. His daughter was also not fated with Qi Xianqing. Father. Ning Qing was so angry that her eyes were red. She felt powerless in her heart. She knew that no matter how she questioned, her father would believe in Qi Xianqing as if he was bewitched. She secretly decided that when Qi Xianqing left, she would immediately destroy the brocade box. She didn't want her father to eat the elixir that she didn't know what it was. Qi Xianqing smiled lightly. He was not angry at all. He said, I come here just to return a favor. Your favor is repaid. Next, it's your daughter's turn. Then he looked at Ning Qing. The latter suddenly snorted and turned her head. Ning Yunji was so angry that he almost turned the table. Junior, sit here. I will do a divination for you. As soon as Ning Yunji heard that Qi Xianqing was going to do a divination for his daughter, he was overjoyed. He immediately held Ning Qing's hand and forced her to sit. Ning Qing was furious in her heart. She stared at Qi Xianqing taking out pieces of tortoiseshell. She wanted to see how this person deceived her father. Qi Xianqing was in a very good mood today because of Su Li. If it happened in the past, he would have already left. How could he still sit here? He was also a little uncomfortable to be suspected by the daughter of a registered disciple. At this moment, he was in a good mood and took out 3 pieces of tortoiseshell. He gently stroked the surface of the tortoiseshell with one hand. Immediately, a dazzling white light flashed through the cracks of the tortoiseshell. Ning Qing stared at it and almost thought that she was dazzled. It's just a small camouflage. There must be some mechanism. The luminous scale powder is hidden in the cracks of the tortoiseshell. Ning Qing thought to herself. However, what happened next made her unable to find any reason to do so. Because the 3 pieces of tortoiseshell suddenly flew up from the table and rotated around her. This, Ning Yunji was also shocked. He just saw that Qi Xianqing controlled a stone and beat away a group of thieves. Ning Qing's eyes were full of light. It seemed that she returned to her childhood and was full of novelty. She had long forgotten how she offended Qi Xianqing before. This kind of means was really only immortals could do it, right? What her father said was true. Ning Qing couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. What she did just now was really too much, but at this moment, Qi Xianqing shouted softly. The 3 pieces of tortoiseshell immediately flew back to his hand and combined into a perfect one. At the same time, a line of white light appeared on it without any words in the world. Qi Xianqing frowned slightly and couldn't help but look up at Ning Qing. This woman, would she have a relationship with people in the martial arts circle in the future? Grandmaster? Seeing Qi Xianqing frowning and being in a daze, Ning Qing was very nervous. Would she have a disaster in her life? Did Qi Xianqing feel embarrassed? You are born with a bitter life. It's not all your father's fault that your mother died. It's more because of your congenital deficiency and your body is too weak. Qi Xianqing said first. Ning Qing was slightly stunned and then became silent. Of course, she knew that it was not her father's fault, but she couldn't forgive him from the bottom of her heart. Her father made mistakes in those years. Ning Yunji also sighed softly. He did make mistakes in those years. After so many years, he hadn't remarried. On the one hand, it was for Ning Qing. On the other hand, it was because he hadn't let go. As for the future of this girl, Chapter 142. Ning Yunji's face changed slightly, and he was embarrassed. It seemed that Ning Qing's marriage was a taboo that couldn't be mentioned. Ning Qing was stunned. She didn't leave as long as her father mentioned it as before. Instead, she lowered her head and kept silent for a moment. Then she raised her head and said with complexity, I only know that his name is Hong Jian. 10 years ago, he seemed to disappear suddenly. I can't find him no matter how hard I try. Grandmaster, your divination is magical. Can't you know his whereabouts? Qi Xianqing couldn't help laughing and sighed. Little girl, your grandmaster is not an immortal. Looking for a person is like looking for a needle in a haystack. It can't be known by a piece of turtle shell. But I can guarantee that you will meet each other in the future. You just need to let nature take its course. Really? Ning Qing's eyes immediately brightened. Ning Yunji hadn't seen such an excited look for 10 years. For a heartless man. Ning Yunji shook his head. He was old and didn't care so much about his daughter. He only hoped that they could have a good result. What I said is true. But it depends on you whether you will be happy or sad when you meet him. Qi Xianqing smiled, but he sighed in his heart. If it was an ordinary person, he could find him with the seeking person divination. But Hong Jian had an extraordinary origin. In the future, he would have karma with the people around him. Once the divination involved himself, he couldn't see it clearly. I have been alone all my life. Who has karma with me now is only Su Li. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but worry. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but worry. He didn't have much time to live, and he couldn't continue to lose his life. He could only try to create better practicing conditions for Su Li. Early the next morning, a long line of carriages drove out of the Qinghe town. The carriages were full of parcels, which were the property of the Su family in these years. After selling the land of the 2 byway buildings and the silk shop business, Su Huanli had millions of taels of silver for the first time. He was in a very good mood. Looking at the scenery on both sides of the official road, he seemed to experience a rebirth and transformation. The only fly in the ointment was that Su Huanli pulled a long face and heard the screams from time to time in the carriage behind him, which were made by Zhu Yan. An apology alone wouldn't be able to appease the anger in his heart for framing him and putting him in prison. Not to mention that their relationship as husband and wife over the years had long dissipated with the waves of conflict. If it were not for Su Qingtan's persuasion, he would have divorced Zhu Yan. How could he let her go to the capital with him? Zipei, go and talk to your eldest brother. Slow down, slow down. If I go on like this, I will die of pain before I reach Yunjing. Su Zipei, who was serving on the side, immediately got up. She didn't look bored at all. Maybe Zhu Yan's performance in the inn that day made her feel a little guilty. No one knew how long this patience, which was transformed from guilt, would last. Su Qingtan was concerned about Su Li's thoughts. He was also afraid that Zhu Yan would die of pain on the road, so he ordered them to slow down and asked the accompanying mammy to send a cushion. Then Zhu Yan's screams were finally reduced. It was not a big problem for her to reach Yunjing. Ling Qinglan left a lot of confidants. All of them were seniors who reached the acquired 8th hurdle or above. In addition, with the golden signboard of the Supreme Judiciary, the robbers on the road avoided them. "Chief, are we really not going to rob them? With one look, I can tell that these people are millionaires. They have a lot of money." "Bah! Did your brain grow on the body of a pig? Do you see the sign of the Supreme Judiciary on the carriage? If we rob them today, the Supreme Judiciary will send troops to destroy our nest tomorrow. If you want to rob them, you can do it alone. I still want to live for a few more years." The young robber was dumbfounded when he heard this and immediately shut his mouth. Nothing happened along the way. Under the care of Su Qingtan, Su Li not only had a carriage with Mammy Li, but also separated the luggage from the Su family. Her special position in Su Qingtan's heart was obvious, which made Su Zipei gnash her teeth with hatred. Li Yuelian also felt uncomfortable. But she also saw what happened in the past year. She knew that her son cared about Su Li very much, so she didn't dare to say anything bad about Su Li. For her, no matter what happened to Su Li, he and Qinghao finally had a good life. They would be very comfortable in the future. There was no conflict between her and Su Li, so there was no need to make trouble. In Zhu Yan's screams from time to time, there were more and more people on the desolate official road after 10 days. Su Qingtan finally saw the tower of Yunjing in the distance. The huge outline was like an ancient giant beast. He couldn't help but sigh. They finally arrived at Yunjing. Su Li opened the window and looked at the tower in the distance. She had excellent eyesight and could almost see the 3 golden characters above the gate. Yunjing City. In this life, she finally came. Su Li looked indifferent, but her heart was surging. In this life, the Yunjing City in her eyes would never be a slaughterhouse. Even if it was going to be slaughtered, it would be her. "Mom, we are in Yunjing. Good days are coming." Su Zipei excitedly helped Zhu Yan to stand up and let her barely see the outside through the window. Zhu Yan was also excited, but she didn't show it. But she still couldn't help touching Su Zipei's face. "I have been waiting for this day for a long time." Although they had already seen the outline of Yunjing City, the carriage team of the Su family drove for 2 hours to reach the tower. Standing at the gate and looking up, Su Huanli's mouth was so big that 2 eggs could be swallowed. He had never seen a city whose wall was dozens of feet high. It was so magnificent and terrible. Standing here, he was like a small ant. A group of bumpkins. The rich childs who lined up in front of the gate sneered. Their voices were so loud that Su Huanli heard them clearly. His ears were red with anger instantly. But here was the capital. He just came here and didn't want to make trouble for his son. After pointing for a long time, he could only say bitterly, "Ignorant boy, I won't argue with you." Seeing that Su Huanli was so timid, the rich child immediately laughed wildly. Even his maids and servants laughed with him. The guards seemed to know the rich child. They didn't come to settle the dispute. Instead, they watched the show aside. It's true that the kind of master is like the kind of dog. Ma Laosan's servant is still so unbearable. Suddenly, a calm male voice sounded behind Su Huanli. The rich child was stunned at first, and then he was angry. He shouted angrily, "Which bastard dares to scold me? Stand out." Before he finished his words, he saw the door of the carriage behind opened. A person got off. It was Su Qingtan. Seeing the mark on the carriage, the rich child's pupils shrank. When he saw who the person was, his face changed even more. There was a strong fear in his heart. He said slowly, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be our Su Qingtan, the nerd Su. Just like a good-for-nothing. I'm really surprised that he could enter the Supreme Judiciary to eat and wait for death." Su Qingtan's reaction was very calm. His experience in the National Academy for more than half a year had taught him how to endure. Ling Qinglan's henchman behind him stood out at this moment and said expressionlessly, "Child Lu, if you slander the imperial court, you will be beheaded." The tone was extremely calm, but it made the rich child change his face suddenly. He was shocked and couldn't restrain himself anymore. He opened his mouth and scolded, "Don't slander me. I have always been loyal to the imperial court. How can I slander it?" Su Qingtan smiled slightly. When he was about to speak, a clear voice like that of an oriole suddenly sounded behind him. "Child Lu just said that my eldest brother could enter the Supreme Judiciary to eat and wait for death. In your eyes, is the Supreme Judiciary an institution for the imperial court officials to eat and wait for death?" While talking, Su Li walked over leisurely. Her light red skirt fluttered like red leaves in autumn. With her delicate and perfect face, she looked gorgeous. In normal times, Child Lu would be shocked by Su Li's beauty. Then he would try his best to please her, but now he was full of panic and trembled slightly. He was really stunned by Su Li's question just now. Slandering the imperial court was really punishable by death. A smell of urine suddenly spread. Su Qingtan frowned and saw a puddle of water at Lu Xing's feet. He couldn't help but shake his head slightly. He was so unbearable. He was just scared and peed directly. Su Li's little face was slightly red. She cleared her throat and quickly turned her head away. Su Qingtan couldn't help but laugh and quickly let her go back to the carriage. "Boring. Brother Wang, let's go. Let's go to the city first." Su Qingtan waved his hand to the young man who helped him just now and got on the carriage. The young man glanced at Su Li's carriage with a little surprise and was secretly surprised. He had known that Su Qingtan doted on his second sister very much and often talked about how smart Su Li was. He had thought that Su Li's reputation was flattered by the Qinghe town, but he did not expect that Su Li seemed to have some ability. It was difficult for the factions in the capital to fight openly. They couldn't fight when they met. Naturally, there were many quarrels. He was influenced by Ling Qinglan and naturally learned a lot. He could easily find faults in Lu Xing's words. But Su Li just arrived in the capital, and she could quickly understand the flaws. It was really rare. I was worried that after the Su family entered the city, it would cause some trouble to the second lord, especially Su Li. Now it seems that I worried in vain. An idea flashed through his mind. The young man didn't look at the smiling guard at the gate. He waved his hand and the long carriage team immediately entered the tall city gate. The streets of Yunjing City were extremely spacious. It was enough for 10 carriages to run side by side without crowding. In addition, it was already evening, so there were not many pedestrians on the road. The Su family's motorcade was smooth all the way. They arrived at Su Qingtan's residence in Yunjing City before dark. After instructing the accompanying mammy to pack the luggage, Zhu Yan immediately chose a room to rest. The torment of the past half-month made the wound on her buttocks worsen a lot. Su Qingtan took Su Li, Li Yuelyan and others to walk around. Su Qinghao finally couldn't help but shout, "Brother, this house is so small. It is not half the size of the previous one." Li Yuelyan suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She pulled Su Qinghao's body and scolded him, "How? Don't be rude to your brother. Every inch of land in Yunjing City is expensive. How can the Desu town compare with it? Although this house is only half the size of the previous one, in terms of value, the house in our hometown is not as good as this one." "Oh, I know, mother." Su Qingtan obviously didn't listen to her. He said perfunctorily. Then he pulled Su Qingtan and said coquettishly, "Brother, go to the martial arts field with me. You haven't played with me for a long time." Su Qingtan's eyes were helpless, but also doting. He turned back and said with a smile, "Second sister, mother, I have arranged your courtyard. It is as good as father's. I will go to play for a while. If you need anything, you can find Zhu." Zhu was his personal maid, so he always took her with him. Seeing that the relationship between the two brothers was still the same as before, Li Yuelyan was gratified. She glanced at Su Li and hesitated for a moment. Then she gently held Su Li's slightly cold hand and said softly, "Come on, go to see the courtyard with me. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.